Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little darker. You're headed straight into the cold, foggy streets of Victorian London, the kind they don't show on postcards. It's 1862, you're broke, alone, and, let's just say, you probably won't survive this. But that's okay, because you're not really you tonight. You're someone else. Someone caught between gaslights and shadows, doing whatever you must to survive in a world that already decided what you're worth. Spoiler alert, not much. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Helps me out more than you know. And hey, what time is it where you are? Drop your city and the hour in the comments. I want to know who else is up at this strange sleepy hour. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It hits you the moment you step off the train at Euston. Thick, damp, coal-scented air that claws its way down your throat. Welcome to London, sweetheart. The year is 1862, and the sky above is a permanent shade of stained dishwater. You're not here for sightseeing. You've arrived with a carpet bag containing exactly 3 things: a cracked hairbrush, a petticoat that smells faintly of wood smoke, and a letter of recommendation that nobody's going to read. You were supposed to be a maid for some house in Kensington, but that fell through somewhere around Birmingham, so here you are, shoes scuffed from the walk, fingers numb despite your gloves, trying to figure out what happens when you're alone in a city built on soot and secrets. You pass under a flickering gas lamp trying to find a place that won't turn you away. Your dress is last season, your accent's a little wrong, and people here can smell desperation the way dogs smell fear. The streets are louder than you imagined, carriages clatter in, boot heels on cobblestone, the occasional scream or whistle in the distance. Somewhere, someone's playing a concertina off-key. The alleys breathe and mutter. There are children fighting over a bit of bread. A man with no teeth offers you a warm place to sleep, and you keep walking. You've read the papers, you know about the dangers, but nothing in print prepares you for this. The city isn't a place, it's a creature, living, breathing, starving, and it looks at you like you're already dinner. By the time you stumble into Whitechapel, the fog has turned yellow with gaslight, and your stomach's making a noise that'd scare pigeons. You've stopped feeling your toes. A woman smoking a clay pipe watches you from a doorway, face hidden beneath a thick scarf. Her eyes scan you, dress, boots, the way you clutch your bag. She sees what you are, or at least what you might become. A fact for your pocket, by 1859, there were an estimated 80,000 prostitutes in London. That's the official number. Unofficially, no one really knew. The line between working girl and unemployed housemaid could vanish with just one skipped rent payment. And you've already missed 2? The wind kicks up. You catch the scent of wet horse dung and spilled gin. It's as glamorous as it sounds. Your plan is loose. Find work, keep clean, stay out of trouble. But your stomach doesn't care about plans. Neither does your landlord, who will want payment up front, no questions asked. You duck into a narrow street between 2 brick buildings. It's darker here. A man vomits noisily against a wall, and you nearly slip on a trail of something that might be blood. You don't ask. Eventually, you find what passes for a lodging house. A sagging structure with blacked-out windows and a warped door. A chalkboard outside advertises, "Clean bed for D." You laugh, the irony is sour. Inside, the air is thick with mildew and coal smoke. A woman with a hunched back and eyes like cracked glass takes your coin without a word and points to a narrow staircase. It creaks with every step. Your room is less a room, more a cupboard with a straw mattress and a broken window. There's a single candle stub on the floor. You sit down slowly, the springs groaning beneath you. Through the wall you hear a baby crying, then a man shouting, then silence. It's like a lullaby composed entirely of regret. Outside, the fog presses against the glass like a curious ghost. You try to sleep, you really do, but every time your eyes close you hear a new sound, a scratch, a moan, a door creaking open that shouldn't be. In this moment, wrapped in your thin coat and someone else's blanket, you start to understand something crucial. Surviving London isn't about luck, it's about choices, ugly ones, and already you're running out of good ones. Quirky little fact, London's fog, often romanticised in books, was actually known as pea-soupers, because the air was so thick with soot and sulphur that it turned greenish yellow. People died just walking across the street. Not from crime, just the air. The air killed you. Now here's something scholars still can't agree on. How much of London's prostitution problem was fueled by industrial poverty, and how much was because of actual demand? Was it desperation from women, or exploitation by men who knew no one would stop them? Probably both. But ask 3 historians and you'll get 5 conflicting essays, each more morally self-righteous than the last. For now, though, all that matters is that you're here. You're breathing, you're broke, and somewhere outside your crooked little window the streets are whispering your name. Sleep well. Morning comes in like a slap. Not because the sun is out, this is London, and sunshine is more of a rumour than a reliable presence, but because someone just screamed 3 doors down. You jolt upright, heart pounding, and bang your elbow on the wall because of course the room is that small. The mattress beneath you is flattened into a series of springs and damp straw, and your whole body smells like smoke, mould, and last night's despair. You shuffle to the cracked basin in the corner and splash cold water on your face. It smells faintly of coal and iron, like it was pulled straight from the Thames, which, honestly, it might have been. There's no soap, but you rub your hands together like it'll help. You smooth your hair as best you can with your fingers, lacing up your boots, and step into the hallway, which is now thick with arguments, babies wailing, and someone hawking something that is absolutely not tobacco. Downstairs, the landlady is lighting her pipe with a twist of newspaper. She doesn't look up when you pass, but she mutters, "You'll want Lambeth. Work there if you're looking." She's right. You are looking. For what? You're not even sure anymore. But something tells you that Lambeth has its own answers. You step into the morning fog, or what passes for it. The streets stink worse in daylight. Overnight refuse, bits of fish, rotting bread, questionable liquids, cook slowly under a week-sipped sun. You pass a man scraping blood off the stones with a wooden paddle. You don't ask questions. Questions have consequences. As you walk south, the city's teeth become more visible. Jagged rows of crumbling buildings, iron bridges choked with coal smoke, and gutters that bubble with God knows what. You cross the Thames over Westminster Bridge, and the view is nothing like the postcards. The river churns thick and brown like a stew you'd never eat, carrying dead rats, half-burned lumber, and the occasional bloated something you'd rather not identify. The smell hits like a fist. A quick fact for your inner trivia goblin. During the 1858 Great Stink, the Thames got so vile that even members of Parliament had to flee their chambers with handkerchiefs pressed to their faces. The government was literally brought to its knees by the smell of its own city. If that doesn't sum up Victorian London, I don't know what does. Lambeth is worse than you expected. Somehow both noisier and more dead at the same time. Children dart around barefoot, faces streaked with soot, clothes made of patches holding other patches together. A drunk is slumped against a butcher's wall, snoring beside a pile of offal. 2 women lean against a lamppost, hips cocked, chatting through broken teeth and cracked lips. One smoking a pipe and making jokes about a constable who tried to haggle last night. The other nudges her, notices you. "You knew?" she calls, squinting through the fog. "Got that look, lost girl look." You don't answer at first, but she waves you over with a finger crooked like a hook. "Come on then, ain't no shame left to shed." Her name is Marjorie, though everyone calls her Rat-Tooth Marge. She flashes a grin missing 3 molars and offers you a sip from a cracked bottle of gin. You refuse politely, and she shrugs like she expected as much. Her friend, Ginny, small, sharp-eyed, barely older than you, gives a short laugh. "Better start drinking now," Ginny says, "before your conscience gets in the way." They explain things in the way women like them do. Fast, blunt, laced with jokes that are 70% pain. There's no shame among the unfortunates, just math. Rent is 4p. A stale loaf costs 2p. A man will pay you a shilling for an hour if you're lucky, if you're young, if your skin isn't bruised. And if he doesn't, there's no one to complain to. That's your education for the day. Hope you were taking notes. Marge tells you something odd between coughs. Keep your teeth rotten and your nails dirty. Better for fending off the real monsters. The clean ones are the worst. It sounds like nonsense, but she says it with a voice that suggests she's earned the right to know. Now here's a strange historical tidbit. Some women in the trade would intentionally blacken their teeth to appear older, sicker, less desirable, to avoid being selected by certain clients. In a cruel twist, ugliness could be armour. Think about that. You don't say much as they talk. Mostly you listen. You're still trying to decide if this life is a pit or a plank, something you've fallen into, or something you can walk across to something else. Hope's a dangerous flavour here, though. Too much and you get sloppy. You try asking about jobs, real ones, honest ones. Marge laughs so hard she wheezes. You want real work? Go back in time. It's all sold out here. Ginny adds, maybe try the factories if you fancy getting your arm chewed off by a loom. It's not hopeless, just heavy. You're not quite ready to do what they do, not yet, but something inside you knows that if things don't turn soon, if luck doesn't come crawling out of the sewer to greet you, this is where you'll land, between a gin bottle and a gas lamp, hoping for shillings, praying for mercy. As the day dims and the lamps hiss to life, you feel something inside you settle. Not comfort, not peace, but resignation. It's quieter than fear, a kind of cold, though. Now here's something scholars still like to argue about. How much agency did women like Marge and Ginny really have? Some historians paint them as victims of economics, forced into sex work by poverty. Others say they had more control than people assumed, strategic, self-reliant, navigating a brutal world with cunning. The truth, probably tangled somewhere in between. But tonight, you're not here to debate, you're here to survive. You part ways with the girls as the street lamps throw long shadows across the cobbles. One of them calls, "Be careful, Dove, pretty ones get snapped up fastest." And she doesn't mean by clients. You don't ask what she means, you don't want to know. You just walk, boots tapping out a quiet rhythm against a city that never stops watching. The rookery you end up in isn't on any official map, that's the point. Tucked behind a tannery and sandwiched between two collapsing brick buildings, it feels less like a place you go to live and more like where you go when there's nowhere left to fall. It doesn't have a proper name. People just call it the Dip, which you quickly learn refers to both the literal sunken courtyard at its centre and the way your soul seems to sag a little upon entering it. You're led there by a boy who might be 9 or 19. It's impossible to tell beneath the layers of soot and attitude. He offers to find you a space in exchange for a farthing and a scrap of bread. He's got more hustle than most adults you've met, and he doesn't blink when you tell him you have neither. Then I'll take a smile and a promise, he says, so you give him one of each. The Dip hums with life, but not the kind that feels particularly human. Clotheslines crisscross above your head like a spiderweb of damp, sagging cotton. Every corner holds a different sound. Coughing fits that last too long to be healthy. The wheeze of an old concertina playing us a hymn that's definitely lost its hope, someone moaning behind a tarp, and someone else laughing too loudly to be sane. Rats scurry between boots with no sense of fear. One pauses beside you, gives a half-interested sniff, and moves on. You're not food yet. The boy leaves you in front of a crumbling brick archway that opens into a low-ceilinged room lit by a single oil lamp and heated only by the shared body warmth of its inhabitants. There's straw on the floor and more than a few bundles of people pretending not to be awake. A woman with a face like weathered leather nods toward an empty corner. "It's yours till morning. Don't ask questions, don't touch nothing that ain't yours, and don't cry." You thank her, sit down, and try to keep your knees from touching the man curled up next to you. He smells like boiled onions and failure. It takes a while to stop shaking, and even longer to convince yourself you can close your eyes. The city's noises don't stop at the rookery door. They leak through like poison gas, arguments, footsteps, the low pulse of misery that beats from the cobblestones themselves. But somehow you sleep. You wake to warmth, which would be lovely if it weren't coming from someone else's armpit. You scramble to your feet, heart racing. The man beside you grumbles but doesn't open his eyes. You brush straw from your skirts and step outside just in time to see the street vendors setting up shop. A woman with a tray of meat pies swears creatively as she shoos off a gang of cats. A toothless man slaps a pan full of eels, shouting, "Fresh from the Thames!" as if that's a good thing. Children run through the alleys barefoot, chasing one another with sticks and squealing in delight, or hunger. Often it's both. You buy a crust of bread with your last coin. It tastes like flour and regret. As you chew, you take in the rookery's morning rituals. Someone emptying a chamber pot directly into the street. Someone else scrubbing a blood stain off a door with lye and a sponge that's mostly holes. The boy from last night waves at you from a rooftop before vanishing like smoke. You're not sure if you imagined him. Time feels strange here, slow and fast all at once. You spend the day trying to make yourself useful, but every time you ask someone if they need help, you get a suspicious glance or a brush off. Everyone here's already got their own girl for errands or their own cousin sleeping under the counter. The truth is, there's no room for generosity in a place where everyone's hanging on by their fingernails. Here's a fact to tuck away. Rookeries like the Dip were often controlled by informal landlords known as rookery kings, men, and occasionally women, who rented out space by the square foot, sometimes charging people to sleep standing up or even leaning against a rope. Yes, really. A rope slung across a room where people could pay a penny to hang off it and doze without collapsing. Imagine being so tired that vertical sleep is an upgrade. The woman who watches over your particular rookery calls herself Mother Peg, and she rules this patch of filth with a mixture of scowls and surprising tenderness. You watch her shoo a drunk away from a sleeping baby, then turn around and threaten to gut a man who tried to sneak off with someone's boots. She's the only thing keeping this place from sliding fully into hell. Mother Peg takes a liking to you, which might be the first decent break you've had in weeks. She gives you chores, boiling water, patching blankets, running messages. In exchange, you get half a tin of soup and a square of dry floor to sleep on that isn't next to Onion Man. It's not much, but it's something. Every hour spent not selling yourself on the street feels like a small victory. Still, you notice things: the girls who disappear, the boys who stop coming back, the whisper of something darker moving just outside the boundaries of this broken place. There's always a new face, and an old one missing. People go missing here like dropped buttons. No one really notices until you trip over the hole they left. One afternoon, you spot a girl no older than 13 being pulled into a side alley by a man with ink-black gloves. You hesitate, step forward, then freeze, because no one else reacts, not even a flicker. You back away, heart hammering, and tell yourself you didn't see what you saw. That kind of courage gets you nowhere fast in the dip, just a knife between your ribs. Quirky fact: the Rookeries had their own underground postal system. Letters could be delivered anonymously from one end of the slum to the other via a network of kids, drunks, and chimney sweeps. It was more reliable than the Royal Mail, and far less judgmental about your spelling. And here's the ongoing historical debate. Were rookeries like this a failure of social planning or an inevitable symptom of capitalism gone feral? Historians argue whether slums were neglected on purpose, useful dumping grounds for the poor, or just too complex for Victorian bureaucracy to untangle. Either way, no one important lived here. And that's all that really mattered. By nightfall, you've earned your soup. You sip it slow, trying to ignore the occasional crunch that might be rat bone. You're not scared, not exactly, but the weight of the city is pressing down on your chest. Like it knows you're trying to resist and wants to see how long you'll last. You settle onto your patch of floor, wrapped in a coat someone died in, and for a second in the quiet just before sleep, you almost feel okay. Almost. Then a scream rips through the night, closer this time, and you remember. You're in the dip now, and the dip never sleeps. You wake to silence, not the comforting kind, but the wrong kind. The kind that feels like the city's holding its breath. No footsteps, no tin pots clattering, no babies crying from thin lungs, just stillness. You sit up slowly, joints stiff from the floor, throat dry from the thick soot you've been breathing all night. Around you, the bundles of sleeping bodies have begun to stir. Even the rats seem unsure if they're supposed to be moving yet. You step outside, blinking into a murky dawn. The fog's thick, low to the ground, and it clings to your clothes like damp fingers. In the alley, a line of water snakes along the cobblestones, red at the edges. You follow it with your eyes until you find the source. A body, face down, barefoot. No one screams this time. People gather slowly. Mother Peg, a few of the boys, an old man who always smells of cloves. They don't touch the body, just stare. Someone mutters, "Third of this week," and spits. The girl is young, not a regular here, but familiar enough. Her hair's matted with mud, her skirt pushed up past her knees. A smear of red stretches from her mouth to the gutter. No constables in sight. No one lighting lanterns to take statements or offering words like investigation or justice. The city has rules about who deserves attention, and this girl isn't on that list. Mother Peg finally waves her hand. "Get her moved before the rats do," she says, turning back inside. You swallow, the taste of iron rising in your throat. There's no ceremony. Two boys drag the body toward the back lot behind the tannery, where someone's dug a shallow grave among broken glass and dead pigeons. You stand still, trying not to shake. You don't know what's worse, that she's dead or that nobody seems surprised. Later, when the vendors return to their corners and the usual chaos restarts, it's like she never existed at all. That afternoon, while delivering a bundle of threadbare shawls to an old seamstress who swears she once dressed the Queen, she didn't, you find yourself on a wider street, more light, less stink. Gas lamps lining the sidewalks, flickering even in daylight. You pause beneath one, watching as the flame dances inside its glass prison. Then you see them, across the road near the mouth of a small square. A trio of women, perfectly poised, painted faces glowing beneath the gaslight, skirts just short enough to catch attention without scandal. They lean into the shadows and smiles of passing men, offering something more than conversation. They laugh, sharp, musical, not quite kind. You recognise what they are. Not rookery girls, not starving, not some sick, not desperate in that same raw way. These are Nightwalkers, the high street kind dressed in gowns that suggest they might have once had names like Ophelia or Cora. Their corsets are tight, their gloves laced, and they speak with the smoothness of girls who have learned to make themselves seem less available, until the price is right. You cross the street, careful not to look like you're gawking. One of them, older, with the sort of painted beauty that's both enchanting and exhausting, clocks your interest immediately. "First time?" she purrs. You try to answer, but your voice catches somewhere in your throat. She gestures for you to come closer. You do. She introduces herself as Eloise. You're not sure if it's real. She wears her false name like a badge. You tell her yours, or maybe you make one up too. It seems fitting. Eloise looks you over, not with pity, but with calculation. "Rookery girl," she says. That smell doesn't wash off quick. You flinch, but she waves her gloved hand. "Don't be insulted. I came from Bethnal Green myself. Took me 3 years and 20 tricks to learn how to walk in heels without tripping. You'll get there." "Will you? You're not sure." She nods at the girl beside her, a redhead with eyes like cold tea. "This is Floss. She sings when she's drunk and punches when she's not. And that one," she points to a third woman sulking by a railing, "that's Vera. Don't talk to Vera unless you want your feelings hurt. They're not kind, not warm, but they're honest, and in this city that's something." Eloise tells you how this end of the street works. You don't work corners, you float. You linger in doorways, you time your gaze just right, you wait for the men with coins heavy enough to dull their conscience. She explains the tiers. The girls in the shadows make pence, the ones under the lamps earn shillings, and the ones upstairs, the ones with a proper madame and a locked room, they can earn pounds, but that comes with its own price. Here's your historical fact. By the 1860s, London's prostitution economy was so structured that brothels often had price brackets, like menus. There were 2-penny uprights, no, I'm not explaining that, all the way to luxurious salons where aristocrats could indulge in roleplay and oysters. Seriously, oysters. Nothing says decadence like shellfish and shame. The night arrives fast, and with it the shimmer of gaslight becomes seductive. You sit with Floss on the steps of a shuttered apothecary, listening as she tells you about her first client. He paid with a button and a lie. She keeps the button, though she doesn't remember why. There's a quiet moment between you where she watches you watching the passers-by. "You'll try to pick the kind ones at first," she says. "You'll think it makes it better. It doesn't. Eventually, you'll stop looking at their faces." She lights a cigarette with fingers that tremble just slightly. The flame flickers orange, and for a second her face looks older than it should. Nearby, Eloise leans into a gentleman in a top hat who smells like cloves and leather. He tucks something into her palm. She disappears with him down a side street, heels clicking like a metronome. That's when it hits you. This isn't just survival, it's theatre. Everyone out here plays a role. The clients pretend not to know what they're buying, the girls pretend they're not selling it, and you're still pretending there's another way out. Strange fact for the night. Some Victorian prostitutes used lemon halves as makeshift contraceptives. Lemons. They believed the acid helped kill off what they didn't want to carry. That's both horrifying and kind of genius, if desperate. Necessity makes chemists of us all, apparently. As for scholarly debate, well, there's one that always sparks fights at conferences. Were these women victims of a brutal patriarchal society? Or were they entrepreneurs of their own bodies in a system that gave them no other options? You've heard both sides now. Tonight, you're too tired to care. You head back to the Rookery with a pocket still empty and a head full of voices. Floss said you could come by tomorrow if you wanted. Eloise warned you not to get too attached to anyone. Vera never said a word. As you curl up on your patch of floor, you stare at the ceiling beams above, covered in soot and tiny scurrying shapes. And you wonder, not for the first time, how far you're willing to fall before you finally call it flying. You think maybe this is the day you'll finally land something honest. No corners, no flirty glances under gas lamps, no whispers exchanged in alleys. Just good, honest work that smells like flour or ink or horsehair brushes. Anything but skin. That's the plan anyway. But in Victorian London, plans have a habit of unravelling the moment you step into the street. The Rookeries already emptied by the time you tie your boots and sneak out. Mother Peg's sharpening a knife by the doorway. Whether it's for food or revenge, you don't ask. She eyes you with that squinty look of hers and grunts. Try Clark and Well. They're hiring down by the printworks. Least they were last week. Clark and Well sounds far, but not impossible. You follow the city's grimy spine north, past butcher carts, sooty chimneys, and a man juggling rats for pennies. Not even trained rats, just regular ones. London entertainment at its finest. By midday your legs ache and your stomach's chewing itself in protest. You pass by shops with shiny windows and pastries that might as well be diamonds. No one inside looks at you, they never do. You're a smudge on the glass, a background figure in someone else's story. You finally find the printworks. Just off a side street cluttered with ink-stained boys shouting headlines. Inside, the air smells like metal and burned paper. A woman with sleeves rolled to her elbows looks up from a pile of pamphlets. "You know how to set type?" she asks. You don't. She sighs. "Then you'll be wanting the laundry down the alley. They'll take anyone with fingers." The laundry does take you for about 4 hours. You scrub sheets until your skin turns raw and your wrists ache like they're full of gravel. You start to feel hopeful again, which is always a mistake. Then the foreman calls you over. Tall, thin, with a lopsided moustache and hands too smooth for a man in charge of cleaning rags. He places a hand on your back. Doesn't need to say much. The implication hangs heavy in the air like steam. You pull away, and just like that, you're done. "Don't come back," he says, voice flat. "We don't need troublemakers." So you leave, pockets empty, arms sore, and dignity cracked but not broken. Not yet. You wander. It's what the city wants you to do. It eats your purpose first, then your body, then your soul. You find yourself on a bench by the river, watching scum swirl in slow spirals on the surface. You're trying not to cry when someone sits down beside you. She's your age, maybe younger, with dark hair tucked under a shawl and hands too clean to be from the dip. She offers you half a meat pie and a smile that feels like sunlight through fog. "I'm Mary," she says. "You look like you need a friend." And you do, desperately. Mary doesn't live in the Rookery. She boards in a rented room above a fishmonger's, shares it with 2 other girls and a 3-legged cat named Pickle. They call themselves independents, not part of a brothel, not tied to a madam. They have rules, they share clients, defend turf, watch each other's backs. It's less a job and more a pact. Mary invites you to walk with her that night, not to work, just to see. You agree against your better judgment. You're starving and lonely and half-cracked from the constant slipping feeling that nothing you do matters. As evening creeps in, Mary takes you to a pub near 7 Dials. It's loud, stuffy, and smells of beer, old wood, and cheap perfume. But the girls inside, there's something different about them. They're laughing. Not fake giggles to lure men, but real, stupid, belly-deep laughs. One of them is balancing a tankard on her head, while another whistles through her fingers to the tune of Greensleeves. Mary introduces you to them one by one. Lottie, who wears trousers and carries a blade in her boot. Elsie, who does impressions of the Queen after 2 drinks. And Winnie, who swears she once shared a client with Charles Dickens. You're not sure if any of it's true, but you don't care. It's the first time in weeks you felt like a person instead of a problem. Here's your historical fact for the night. Victorian prostitutes didn't all hate their lives. Shocking, I know. Some, especially independents, found rare slices of autonomy in a world that gave women almost none. They chose their clients, split their profits, and even ran informal unions to protect themselves. It wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs. You ask Mary if she ever regrets it. "Only when they're drunk and mean," she says. But then I think, better this than scrubbing blood from sheets or marrying a man who'll hit me for free. There's a bluntness to it that's hard to argue with. Later she tells you about bargains, men who pay with trinkets instead of coins. A silver button, a comb made of tortoiseshell. One once offered her a poem, scrawled on the butcher's paper. She took it anyway, said it was better than the ones who leave nothing but bruises. Weird little tidbit. Some girls kept scrapbooks of those things, tiny, tragic collections of gifts, love notes, buttons, coins with holes in them, their own strange archives of affection and survival. The Victorian version of a heartbreak box, the scholarly debate. This one's juicy. growing number of historians argue that prostitution in this era offered one of the only viable forms of economic agency for working-class women. An ugly freedom, sure, but still a form of it. Others say that's romanticising something inherently exploitative. The truth, like always, is a complicated mess where survival and choice bleed into each other until you can't tell which is which. By the end of the night, you've laughed more than you've eaten, and somehow that's enough. Mary walks you back to the Rookery. She gives you a hug at the door, a proper one, not the kind you flinch from. She even offers you a place at her flat if you want it. You promise to think about it. Inside, the dip is asleep, or pretending to be. You tiptoe back to your patch of floor, careful not to wake the baby wrapped in a sack beside you. For the first time in weeks, you don't feel entirely alone. You lie there in the dark, the night still buzzing in your skin, and think, maybe, just maybe, you might have found your way in, not up, not out, but in. And for now, that's enough. You don't realise how quickly the rules change until someone with a badge reminds you that they exist. It's been 2 days since the night with Mary and the girls. You've been shadowing them, not working, not yet, but lingering nearby like a stray dog hoping to be let in. They don't mind. Mary keeps giving you little tasks, fetching a hairpin, holding her shawl while she chats up a customer, watching her drink to make sure it isn't tampered with. You feel useful, invisible maybe, but safer than you've felt in a while. Until tonight. You're sitting near the edge of the market square, gnawing on the stub of a meat roll that's mostly gristle, when a constable rounds the corner with that smug, stiff-lipped expression that Victorian London seems to breed like a mould. His boots are polished, his moustache sharp, and his truncheon swings like he's practising for something more dramatic. He sees Mary first. She's doing her usual thing, leaning into a gentleman with sideburns that deserve their own postal code. Her laugh is syrupy, her eyes wide and empty in just the right way. But as soon as she spots the constable, her entire face shifts. Not fear exactly, just a bracing, like she knows what's coming. The constable marches right over, pushes between her and the customer, and taps her shoulder with 2 fingers, far rougher than necessary. "That's quite enough of that, miss," he says, voice dripping with the kind of authority only men with zero imagination carry. Mary doesn't flinch. He was just asking for directions. The constable doesn't believe her, not for a second. "Well, now you can direct yourself down to the station." She sighs, barely hiding the eye roll. "Again? New rules," he says. "Or maybe just your turn." You stand up instinctively. Something in you itches to step forward, say something, do anything. But Mary gives the tiniest shake of her head. Not today, not worth it. 2 other girls pretend not to notice, their eyes trained firmly on the gas lamps above. The man she was talking to vanishes, of course. They always do. Mary gets hauled off without a struggle. The constable doesn't bother cuffing her, just grips her elbow like he's afraid she'll contaminate the street if she's allowed to move freely. A moment later, they're gone around the corner. The square settles. No one breathes. No one claps back. You sit down again, feeling smaller than ever. Here's a historical gem to chew on while you sulk. In 1864, Britain passed the first of the Contagious Diseases Acts, which allowed the police to arrest any woman suspected of prostitution in garrison towns and ports, dragging them in for forced medical exams. If found with a venereal disease, they could be locked away in lock hospitals for months. Men, of course, were never tested. That would have been uncivilised. In theory, the act didn't apply to London. In practice, the law bent like wet clay if the copper holding it had a strong enough grip. Later that night, you walk with Lottie and Elsie toward the station, just to see, just in case Mary needs a coat or someone to shout on her behalf. Not that anyone's listening. The constables out front smoke their pipes like they own the fog itself. You try to ask after Mary. One of them looks you over like he's measuring your worth in pennies. "She'll be out in the morning," he says, assuming she's not diseased. And that's the end of that conversation. The 3 of you walk home in silence, shoes slapping against wet stones, the gaslight behind you stretching your shadows long and thin. No one says what they're thinking. That could have been any of us. That it probably will be any of us eventually. Back at the Rookery, you sit outside with your knees pulled to your chest, watching fog coil through the alleys like a lazy ghost. Floss finds you there an hour later. She sits beside you, pulls a flask from her coat and takes a long drink before handing it over. The gin burns, but it's warm. You pass it back. "She'll be all right," Floss mutters. You nod. "She's been through worse. Had a copper drag her into a stable once, told her if she screamed he'd arrest her for assault. She bit him, broke skin. You blink. What happened after that? Floss shrugs. Nothing. Came back 2 weeks later, paid double, and that's London justice for you. Here's a weird little fact to flavour the gin burn. Some brothels kept logbooks, discreetly, also of course recording the names and preferences of their higher class clients, not for marketing purposes, for leverage, insurance. You never knew when you'd need a nobleman's shame to save your skin. That's the real power of the city. It's not strength or beauty or wit, it's leverage. And right now, you don't have any. There's a debate scholars love to chew over when it comes to this era. Were the police intentionally oppressive toward women in the trade? Or were they simply enforcing a twisted system? Some argue that many constables were just pawns, too dull to question orders. Others say the rot was deliberate, that targeting poor women was about maintaining moral theatre, not public health. Like dragging them into stations made the city cleaner somehow. You don't know the answer, but it doesn't really matter, does it, when you're the one being dragged? The next morning, Mary's back, her hair's matted, her lips split. She smells like bleach and pipe smoke, but her eyes? Steady. She walks into the pub like nothing's changed. Everyone cheers, claps her on the back, someone even offers to buy her a drink. She takes it, but barely sips. You ask if she's okay. She snorts. They gave me vinegar to wash with, said it might help with the filth, didn't say if they meant disease or attitude. She shrugs off her coat and plants herself in her usual spot, back straight, gaze sharp. No one's saving us, she says later, quietly, when it's just the two of you by the fire. No charity, no copper, no priest. We save each other, or we don't get saved at all. You nod, throat tight. That night you dream of vinegar and voices, of footsteps echoing in locked halls, of a girl walking alone, shoulders squared, defiance clutched like a coin between her fingers. You wake up before dawn, eyes dry. Maybe today you won't hide. Maybe today you'll stand beside the gaslight too. There's a place just off Commercial Street, tucked behind a crumbling chapel and an abandoned coffin-maker's workshop where the girls go when the pain gets louder than the city. No signs, no shouts, just a low green door with peeling paint and a smell you'll never forget. Bleach, urine, and something sweeter, fainter, like rotting lilacs. The place is called St. Bridget's, but no one who enters calls it that. Most just call it the house. You follow Mary there one grey morning because she can't stop coughing, and not the theatrical kind she fakes when a man gets too rough. This one rattles through her ribs like nails in a tin. Each breath a wager. Her lips are pale, her steps are slow. She waves you off when you offer to carry her shawl, but you stay close. You're not letting her go alone. St. Bridget's is a charity hospital, at least in name. Inside, it looks like someone tried to build a chapel, ran out of money, and decided to fill the pews with suffering instead. The waiting room is a long corridor lit by a single grimy window, and the benches creak under the weight of too many bodies. Women hunch in sickness, some cradling infants that shouldn't be breathing, others hiding sores with scarves and sleeves. A nun with a tight mouth and tired eyes greets you without greeting you. "Name?" she asks. Mary gives her full name. You pretend not to hear the last part, but you tuck it away anyway. She's never told you before. They take Mary behind a curtain. You try to follow, but the nun blocks your path with one hand and a look that says, "Don't push it." You sit. The hours stretch. You watch the light move across the floor like it's trying to escape. You count the other women. 17. No one speaks. One girl keeps tugging at her bonnet string like it's the only thing keeping her head attached. Finally, Mary returns, walking stiffly. She doesn't say much, just nods toward the door and waits until you fall in step beside her. Outside, the fog is thicker, but it smells better than the air inside. She tells you later, once you've got her settled with tea back at her flat. They said I've got it. The bad one. Maybe a few months, maybe a year. You don't ask which one. You already know. The word syphilis hangs between you, unspoken and heavy. Here's your fact of the day. In Victorian London, venereal diseases ran rampant through every layer of society. The rich got private doctors and secret treatments. The poor got vinegar, mercury and shame. Some girls were forced into lock hospitals where treatment meant isolation, scalding washes, and injections that burned worse than the illness. Mary's not crying. She's not even angry. Honestly, she says, I've been waiting for it. This work. Sooner or later, it leaves a mark. She laughs, dry and sharp. Still better than childbirth, though. You flinch, but she doesn't notice. That night you think about the hospital again. About the way the nun looked through you like you were already fading. About the girl on the bench with the bonnet string. You wonder how many of them will die in that hallway. Here's a weird little detail you don't read in the history books. Some women applied white lead powder to their faces not to look beautiful, but to hide the telltale sores. They wore illness like makeup, disguised death as youth. Because if a client saw the truth, the coins would stop. And if the coins stopped, so did everything else. You start to notice things now. The girls with the hollow cheeks and extra rouge, the ones who limp more each week, the ones who vanish quietly. No funeral, no stone. You ask Floss once if she's scared. Of what, she says. Dying? Love, no. That's easy. It's the rotting that's slow. She pulls out a small tin and shows you what she calls her sick kit. Inside, a bar of carbolic soap, a half-used tube of ointment, a folded note from a man who once swore to rescue her, and a vial of laudanum. Just in case it gets too loud in here, she says, tapping her temple. You realise that no one here plans for the future. They plan for the fall. Scholars still argue about how prevalent these diseases were and who spread them. Some blame the brothels. Others point at the upper-class gentlemen who used women's bodies like handkerchiefs. In reality, it was all a circle of blame and denial. No one wanted to admit that London's greatest disease was inequality itself. That night Mary sings. She sits by the window, pale hands wrapped around a chipped teacup, and hums a lullaby you've never heard before. It's soft and old, and it makes your chest ache in a way you can't explain. You ask her where she learned it. My mum sang it, back when things weren't so bad. You don't ask about her mum, you just sit there listening, while the city outside wheezes and moans. When she finally stops, she says, "Promise me something." You nod. "When it happens, when I go, don't let them throw me in the pit. Find a tree, plant me there." Your throat tightens. You nod again. Later, after she's asleep, you wrap your coat around her shoulders and watch the street below. The gas lamps flicker like stars trying to be brave. Somewhere a child cries out and no one answers. You think about St. Bridget's, about vinegar and nun's eyes and bones pressing through skin, about lead powder and perfumed breath and the sound of a voice that knows it's running out of time. You stay up until the lamplight fades. You don't dream. It's midweek when you meet her, the woman they all call Miss Mayfair. Though no one knows if that's her name, the street she came from, or just a cruel joke. She appears like most things in your world do, unannounced and sharp around the edges. You're with Floss near Covent Garden, watching performers juggle apples for a smattering of bored onlookers, when a carriage rolls up so polished you can see your hunger reflected in the wheels. The door opens, and out she steps, all dark green velvet and pale gloves, her waist cinched tighter than mercy. She walks like the street was paved for her, even though it clearly wasn't. Floss mutters, "Speak of the devil, and she shows up with satin trim." You follow her gaze. Every girl in a 6 street radius knows who Miss Mayfair is. She's what you'd call a madam, but madam sounds too common, too soft. Miss Mayfair doesn't run a brothel. She runs the brothel, a 3-story townhouse in Soho with curtains that match the perfume and a front door that never creaks. Her girls wear corsets that don't itch and rings that aren't pawned between paydays. Clients, judges, officers, visiting Americans with strange hats and heavy pockets. It's said she can size up a girl's entire future with one glance. You don't plan to speak to her. You're just watching, but she sees you. Of course she does. Her eyes sweep the crowd like a net, and you don't move fast enough to pretend you're invisible. She walks straight toward you. Floss stiffens. You hold your breath. "You're new," Miss Mayfair says, without the kind of voice that's both kind and terrifying. It isn't a question. You nod. You want to say something clever, or at least coherent, but your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth like it's afraid of being judged. She studies your face like you're a rare coin, one she's not sure she wants to spend yet. "You clean?" It takes a beat to understand. You nod again. "Still have all your teeth?" You open your mouth. Why, you're not sure, but it seems to satisfy her. She reaches into her bag and pulls out a card, gold-pressed, heavy. "Come by tomorrow, I'll give you a tour. You don't have to decide right away." And just like that, she's gone. Back into the carriage, off into the smoke. You hold the card for a long time. It smells faintly of violets and ambition. That night you tell Mary. She stares at the ceiling and lets out a long, thin breath. She pays well, she says, keeps her girls clean, but don't think for a second she's your friend. You ask if she's worked for her. Mary nods slowly. 2 years ago, back when I thought velvet meant safety. What happened? I got sick. She doesn't keep sick girls. Told me I could leave with my dignity or with bruises. I pick the first one. You tuck the card under your mattress and say nothing else. Still, curiosity eats you alive. The next day you go, not dressed up, Miss Mayfair wouldn't expect that, but clean. You wash your hair in a basin that smells like someone else's soap and borrow a half-decent shawl from Floss. No one stops you on the way. When you reach the townhouse, it looks just as everyone says, pristine, polished, quiet as a library where no one reads anymore. A tall man opens the door and leads you in. You step into a foyer lined with oil paintings. None of them are original, but all expensive looking enough to fool the drunk or desperate. A staircase curves like a promise up to the second floor. You hear laughter, soft and practiced, and smell lilac and cloves and something underneath it all that smells like steel. Miss Mayfair meets you in a back parlour. She's in another velvet dress, this one burgundy, with lace at the throat that makes you feel underdressed just for existing. She offers you tea, which you accept because it would feel rude not to, even though your hands shake as you take the cup. She walks you through the house. First floor, entrance, kitchen, dining area for the gentleman. Second floor, rooms for clients, each decorated like the inside of a very rich woman's imagination. Third floor, the girls' rooms are locked with delicate brass keys and dressed in warm blankets and pillows that don't collapse when you lie down. You get your own room, she says. 2 shifts a day, your choice of clients, within reason. I take half, you keep half. Everything else, clothes, food, protection, it's included. It sounds good. Too good. You don't trust it. But then she shows you the small medical room. Actual instruments. Clean sheets. A woman in a white coat who nods at you like a person, not a statistic. Regular checkups, Miss Mayfair says. Every girl. No excuses. Here's a historical fact for your aching head. The wealthier brothels in Victorian London, especially the respected ones, often employed house physicians. Not for the sake of health, mind you, for the sake of reputation. An outbreak of syphilis could ruin a madam's business faster than a constable with a grudge. You finish the tour in the drawing room. Soft chairs, low lighting. A mirror that makes you look taller and slightly less tired. Miss Mayfair offers you a glass of wine. You take it. No pressure, she says. You don't have to say yes. But if you don't, know this. No one on the street owes you a thing, not safety, not fairness. Not another day. Here, I offer you time. Time to save, time to plan, time to choose when you're done. You leave without giving an answer. All day the girls ask what you're thinking. Mary says nothing. She just watches you with that quiet sadness that's become her second skin. Elsie says she'd take it. Lottie says she'd rather fight rats. Floss offers you the flask again. Only you can decide, she says. But if you go, don't forget who you are. That night, you sit with the card in your hand. You run your thumb over the embossed gold lettering. You imagine your life behind that door. Safety, clean sheets, food you don't have to steal or starve for, clients who bathe. You imagine the price. Here's a strange little quirk from the margins of history. Girls in brothels like Miss Mayfair's sometimes adopted entirely new identities. Names, voices, even fabricated pasts. They became characters, not just for the clients, but for themselves. Survival through reinvention. Maybe that's what she's offering you. A chance to disappear into someone prettier, someone softer. You sleep with the card under your pillow and dream of velvet and locked doors. You don't go back to Miss Mayfair's the next day. You don't burn the card either. You just wait. It stays tucked under your pillow like a secret that hasn't decided what kind of trouble it wants to cause yet. Each time your fingers brush the edge of it when you lie down at night, you feel that flutter again. Hope, dread, maybe both. But you don't move, not yet. Instead, you follow the others to the market, where the streets bloom with stink and life in equal measure. You cling to routine. Floss jokes with a fishmonger until he gives her a half-rotten cod for free. Elsie sings some raunchy tune about a chimney sweep with nimble fingers and makes everyone laugh too loud. Mary's quieter these days, but she still walks with that don't mess with me pace, even when her cough makes her lean against lampposts like a drunk. You've started to notice how clothes change everything. Not just what they cover, but what they mean. There's the obvious, sure, Ripped hems and dirty petticoats marking rookery girls from the rest. But there's more to it. Corsets that say I belong to someone. Gloves that say I can afford to hide my hands. Stockings so sheer they practically whisper. That night, back at the flat, Lottie brings out a box. It's locked, but she pops it open with the ease of someone who's never once owned a key but always finds a way in. Inside are treasures. Dresses wrapped in oilcloth, gloves with the pearl buttons. Combs made of bone and painted ivory. A crown for a different kind of queen. She lays them out like ritual offerings. The girls gather close, eyes bright, even though no one's eaten properly in 2 days. "We're going to the clubs," Lottie says, grinning. "Not to work, just to be." You almost say no. You're too tired. You don't want to see another drunk man stumble into your path with spit on his chin and lies on his tongue. But the way Floss lifts a necklace to her throat, and Elsie spins in a second-hand silk gown with a rip near the knee, it does something to you. It feels like resistance, this act of dressing up. Like daring the city to look at you and see someone instead of something. Lottie helps you into a corset that's 3 inches too tight, but she calls it character building. You pull on a dress that once might have been blue, and pin your hair with a rusted clip that looks expensive in candlelight. When you step into the street, the air shifts. You're still hungry, still poor, still unsure of everything, but you're polished. You shine. The club is in the basement of a former wine merchant's, though no one remembers what year the wine ran out and the music moved in. Inside is all brass and velvet, smoke and breath. The men wear cravats or none at all. Some of the women wear top hats. Everyone's pretending. That's the game. You nurse a single drink all night, letting the room pull you in and spin you around. The pianist plays something fast and strange. The crowd whoops and claps like they've forgotten the city is dying just outside the door. You laugh so hard you choke. Mary's wheezing next to you but smiling. You hold her hand and pretend it's just to keep her steady, not because you're scared of how much she's fading. A man tries to talk to you. He's handsome in a hollow sort of way, all teeth and moustache wax. You know his type. He thinks your laugh is charming, and your eyes are tired in a way he can't name but wants to own. You dance with him anyway, for the distraction, for the story. He asks your name. You give him one that isn't yours. He doesn't ask more. He offers to take you home. You decline with a smile and a touch to his chest, just firm enough to say not tonight. He bows, kisses your hand, and vanishes into the smoke. You walk home barefoot, heels in hand, feet blistered but warm. Here's a historical fact to tuck into your corset. Fashion played a massive role in the hierarchy of sex work. Streetwalkers wore bright, garish colours, part advertising, part warning. Parlour girls, the ones in brothels like Miss Mayfair's, wore finer things, often borrowed or shared. Some girls spent every shilling on clothing, not vanity, but survival. The better you looked, the better you were paid. The better you were paid, the better your odds of getting out alive. That night, back at the flat, you and Mary sit on the floor in your borrowed gowns, faces scrubbed raw but smiling. She looks at you like she's seeing something new. "You look like a duchess tonight," she says. You snort. A duchess with cracked heels and a splinter in her thigh. Still counts. You want to ask her what she'd do if she had the choice, the real kind, but you don't. Instead, you both sit in silence, listening to the city hum outside the cracked window. Somewhere below, a carriage rolls by. Somewhere above, a drunk sings a lullaby to no one in particular. And here's a fringe fact to twist into the night. Some clients paid extra to dress the girls up, to pretend they were courting a lady, a governess, even a princess. It wasn't about the sex. It was about pretending for one night that someone wanted them, really wanted them, even if they paid to do it. Historians still argue whether fashion empowered or enslaved these women. Did it give them agency, a mask, a tool? Or was it just another layer of decoration on a cage? You're not sure. All you know is this. For a few hours tonight, you walked into a room and everyone looked. Not because they pitied you, not because they wanted to use you, just because you were there. You fall asleep in the dress, too tired to take it off, heart beating like you've stolen something and gotten away with it. Maybe you did. You learn quickly that the worst men in London don't creep out of quedos or leer from alleys. They stroll out of gentlemen's clubs in tailored coats and polished shoes, flipping silver coins between gloved fingers. They don't need to threaten or shout or stink of gin. They just smile, smooth as velvet, and expect the world to undress for them. And the worst part, it often does. It's late when you find yourself outside the Berwick Club, pressed against the stone wall with Floss and Mary. Half hidden beneath a broken archway. You're not working, not officially, just waiting. Sometimes that's the whole job. Waiting for a client to reappear. Waiting for the fog to thicken enough to cross a square without being noticed. Waiting for someone to make the first move, whether it's a proposition, a threat, or just an acknowledgement that yes, you're here and yes, they see you. A man steps out of the club laughing too loudly. His coat alone costs more than your entire life. He's got the ruddy, well-fed face of someone who hasn't done a single honest day's work, and the eyes of someone who's convinced that makes him better. He spots you and your friends immediately. You watch Mary's body language shift. Chin up, back straight, lips curved into that expression she's perfected. Flirtation laced with just enough distance to make them lean in closer. Floss whispers something under her breath and slides a hand into the pocket where she keeps her knife, just in case. The man crosses the street and without even introducing himself starts speaking in that casual, possessive way men like him have been trained to use from birth. "How much?" he asks, like he's ordering a roast beef. Mary gives a half smile. "Depends on how much conversation you want first." He doesn't laugh. Instead, he looks her up and down and says, "You're cleaner than most, but I'm looking for something younger." There's a pause. A stillness so sharp it feels like a glass just cracked in the air. Mary says nothing, just turns away, jaw clenched. Floss steps forward, mouth already forming a curse, but the man's already walking off, whistling, hands in pockets, like he didn't just slice the air open with that remark. Back in the flat, Mary doesn't say much. She sits by the window and taps her foot, restless and angry. You want to comfort her, but you don't know how to fix what people like him break. So you just sit nearby, a presence. Sometimes silence is the only language people like you get to keep. Here's your historical fact. By the mid-19th century, the sex trade in London wasn't just enormous, it was structured. There were layers to it, an invisible caste system hidden behind lace and coin. Streetwalkers were at the bottom, followed by parlour girls, then brothel women, then courtesans, the kept women, the mistresses with sugar daddies in Parliament. Some even had contracts, with stipends and expectations and clauses about who else they could sleep with. A weird blend of romance and legalese, like a marriage proposal drafted by a solicitor with no soul. And then there were the respectable men who fueled the entire engine. They filled the clubs, ran the courts, published op-eds about the fallen woman in one breath and booked appointments with 15-year-olds in the next. That was the real secret of London's sin trade. It wasn't run by criminals. It was run by gentlemen. Miss Mayfair once told you that her best clients weren't the ones with the most money, they were the ones with the most to lose. Bishops, barristers, cabinet ministers, men who tipped in silence and left no trace. Their coin didn't smell like gin or sweat. It smelled like power. There's a phrase some girls use. He's wearing the mask. It means he's one of them, smiling, polished, saying all the right things, but you know there's something wrong behind the eyes. Something hollow. You start to recognize the look, you start to avoid it, but you also start to need it, just a little, because those are the men who pay the most to pretend they're good. Later that week, you meet one. He doesn't give a name, says it would be inappropriate. Offers you 3 shillings just to sit beside him on a bench and talk. No touching, no staring. Just words. You agree, because why not? It's cold and the money is real. He tells you about his wife, his children, his boring job. Then he asks you if you've ever wanted to disappear completely. You blink. He smiles, not creepily, not like a threat, just sadly. "I envy you," he says. You get to exist outside of everything. You don't respond, but something shifts inside you. Because here's the truth. You don't exist outside of anything, you exist beneath it, crushed under the weight of other people's choices, and the only reason this man envies you is because he doesn't understand what it costs to vanish. Fringe fact of the night? Some of the most exclusive brothels in Victorian London kept discretion rooms, hidden entrances, private lounges, no mirrors, no records, so that men of rank could pretend they never crossed the threshold. Ghosts with silk cravats and powerful last names. You get up before the hour ends, take your 3 shillings, don't look back. Mary watches you count the coins later, her eyes distant. He wasn't rough. You shake your head. Then he'll be worse next time. That's the thing about this life. The men who hurt you don't always do it with fists. Sometimes they do it with words, with statements, with a smile that turns your stomach. There's a scholarly debate that always stirs the academic pot, whether Victorian prostitution was shaped more by sexual repression or by class violence. Was it about desire or control? One camp insists it was an explosion of repressed urges in a society obsessed with virtue. Another says it was a machine of power, where men used bodies the same way they used coal, burned through them to keep warm, then discarded the ash. You think both camps are wrong. It was about convenience. They did it because they could, and no one ever made them stop. That night, Mary sits beside you, her cough a little worse, her eyes a little glassier. You hand her half the coins. She tries to refuse, but you press them into her palm. "No one saves us," she murmurs. "Not really." You nod. But in your head, something else whispers back. "Maybe not, but we can still save each other." The trouble with being saved in Victorian London is that it rarely feels like salvation. More often it feels like being stuffed into someone else's idea of what you should be. Cleaned, scrubbed, silenced, dressed in a frock that itches and makes you look like a rejected governess. Because when the reformers come for you, they don't ask if you want saving, they just assume you do. It starts when a woman in a bonnet stops you outside a baker's. She's holding a pamphlet and has the kind of expression that's equal parts pity and tightly coiled superiority. She calls you dear 3 times in under a minute and speaks with the breathless urgency of someone who's sure God is grading her efforts. She tells you there's a house, not far, and it's warm and safe and run by Christian women who believe every fallen girl deserves a second chance. You glance at the bread she's clutching like a prop and wonder if she's ever missed a meal in her life. She doesn't wait for your answer, just presses the pamphlet into your hand and leaves a scent of lavender and judgment in her wake. The pamphlet is printed on the thin paper and filled with promises. Warm beds, proper meals, Bible study and needlework. You read the word penitence 6 times before you stop counting. That night you show it to Mary, she laughs so hard she nearly chokes on her tea. "They tried to send me to one of those," she says. "Said if I read enough psalms, I'd forget how to spread my legs." You raise your eyebrows. "And?" "I stole a spoon and left after 2 days." Still, curiosity has teeth. You take the pamphlet, fold it into your pocket, and a few mornings later, on an impulse you don't entirely understand, you go. The house is tucked behind an iron gate with peeling paint and a cross above the door. You knock twice and are let in by a woman with skin like folded paper and a mouth that's been pursed so long it probably forgot how to smile. She introduces herself as Matron Lively, which you immediately know is a lie. No one with that name should look this miserable. Inside, the air smells of boiled oats and over-bleached linens. There are girls, maybe a dozen, moving quietly through their chores. No one makes eye contact. They wear matching grey dresses and sensible boots. Their hair is pinned tight, their backs even tighter. No talking, no questions, just quiet obedience. You're offered a tea. You accept, though it tastes like it was brewed from rainwater and regrets. Matron Lively gives you a tour. The sewing room, the chapel, the dormitory where beds line the wall like hospital cots. "Lights out at 8, she says. Morning hymn at 5. You ask if you're allowed to leave. She pauses. This is a place of healing. But girls who don't follow the rules often find themselves back on the streets, or worse. You sleep there that night. They give you a scratchy nightgown and a blanket that smells faintly of mothballs and old soap. It's warm, it's safe, it's also terrifying. The silence hums louder than the noise ever did in the dip. In the darkness, you hear someone crying into their pillow. No one moves to comfort her. Here's your historical fact. By the 1860s, dozens of rescue homes had popped up across London, funded by charities, churches, and occasionally well-meaning aristocrats. Their goal was to reform fallen women through the prayer, structure, and relentless moral correction. Most didn't last. Many of the girls left. Some were forced to stay until their penance was complete, a sentence with no fixed end date. The next morning you scrub floors alongside a girl named Esther, who hasn't spoken since she arrived. You manage to get a smile out of her by making a joke about the matron's shoes looking like boiled turnips. She doesn't laugh exactly, but something behind her eyes flickers. A spark. At lunch you get a ladle of stew and a reading from the Gospel of Luke. The girls eat in silence while the staff preach. You imagine them chewing each spoonful along with a verse. After a week you realise what the reformers really want. Not to rescue you, but to erase you. They don't want you to be whole. They want you to be blank. No stories, no past, no desire, Just a stitched-up version of womanhood they can point to and say, "See? Fixed." Here's something strange. Some reform homes would rename the girls. Stripped of their sinful identities, they'd be reborn as Marys, Annas, Graces, names chosen for piety, not preference. Like sanctity could be stamped onto your soul if you just wore the right label. You last 11 days? Not because it's unbearable, but because it's worse than that. It's empty. You miss the stink of the street, the laughter, the flirting, even the fear. You miss being alive, bruises and all, so you leave, no fight, no ceremony. You slip out through the back door during the morning prayer. No one stops you, you don't even think they notice you're gone. You walk the long route home, through alleyways you haven't dared visit in weeks. The streets are louder than you remember. Messier, better. You pass a pair of girls you don't know sharing a roll and a flask. One of them nods to you like you've been accepted back into a club you didn't realise you'd joined. At the flat, Floss hugs you without asking where you've been. Mary just pats your shoulder and says, "Told you." That night the city feels more like yours again. You sit on the windowsill and breathe in the air. It smells like smoke and sweat and everything you're not supposed to want. Here's a scholarly debate to wrap around your brain like a ribbon. Did rescue homes fail because they didn't understand the girls they were trying to save, or because they never wanted to understand? Some argue they were doomed from the start, built on moral superiority instead of compassion. Others say they were the best society could offer, considering the options. But you've lived it now, you know the truth. You can't save someone by pretending she doesn't exist. You fall asleep with your own name on your lips. And for the first time in weeks, it tastes sweet. It begins with a whisper. That's how all the big shifts start in London. Not with some grand declaration or trumpet blast, but with someone saying something in the back of a pub, too loud after their second drink. A name passed from girl to girl, mouth to ear, like a spell you're not supposed to say aloud. Allegra. That's all. No last name, no address, just Allegra. You hear it first from Elsie, who's brushing coal dust off her skirts after a night pretending to be a scullery maid for a client with control issues. She's grinning. There's someone new, she says, pulling girls from the floorboards and putting them on stage. At first, you think she's talking about another madam, or some woman with a drawing room and a set of rules carved into the wallpaper. But no, Allegra isn't like Miss Mayfair. She's something entirely different. Allegra runs a music hall, a real one. Velvet curtains, rickety balcony, bad lighting. The kind of place where you can smell every spilled pint and broken dream. But she doesn't just hire singers and jugglers. She hires girls. Not for sex, not officially. For performance, for drama, for spectacle. You're skeptical, everyone is. Most things that sound too good to be true in this city usually come with rope tied to the ankles. But then Floss tells you she saw one of Allegra's girls last week on stage, wearing a red dress so bright it looked like the curtain itself had taken a breath and started dancing. She made the men clap, Floss says, but not at her, for her. That's different. That's rare. So one night, you go. The hall is tucked near Holborn, behind a tobacco shop and a meat vendor, who clearly doesn't care how much his sausages smell like feet. The front is painted red, but most of the colour has flaked away. Inside, it's chaos. Noise, smoke, sweat, laughter. The air feels like it's vibrating. The stage is tiny and slanted. The curtain doesn't fully close, but there she is. A girl in green silk singing something too slow for a crowd this drunk. And they're listening. Really listening. No catcalls, no thrown pints. Just this strange, reverent silence broken only by the occasional clink of a coin dropped into a passing hat. Then you see her, Allegra. She stands at the side of the stage in a gown that's seen better days and probably better bodies. But she wears it like royalty, her hair's streaked with grey, tied back with a ribbon that's more memory than fabric. She watches the girls with the intensity of a conductor and the weariness of someone who's seen too much. You edge closer, not close enough to speak, just close enough to study. You watch how the performers glance at her after each act, hungry for her approval. You watch how the clients treat her, with a kind of nervous deference, like they know she's not to be trifled with. And you see how she watches you. Because of course she does. Of course she notices. People like Allegra didn't survive by missing things. Her gaze is sharp and assessing, and in it, you feel something you haven't in a long time. Potential. The kind that doesn't require lying on your back. She approaches you after the show. First time, you nod. You sing? Not well. Dance? Only when no one's watching. She smiles. It's crooked, unapologetic. You've got a good face, she says. Sad. People like sad faces. You're not sure how to respond, so you don't. Allegra tells you to come back tomorrow. I'll let you sweep the stage, she says. See if it suits you. You do, and it does. Sweeping turns into running errands. Errands turn into standing in for rehearsal. One day, one of the girls gets sick and you're asked to read lines in her play you own. Your voice shakes, your knees threaten mutiny. But afterward, Allegra claps once sharply. You'll do, she says, and that's that. Here's your historical fact. Music halls in Victorian London were one of the few spaces where working-class women could flirt with legitimacy. Not just survival, performance, fame even, if you had the talent and thick enough skin. They were rowdy, yes, audiences threw bottles and shouted obscenities, but some girls made names for themselves. Some even escaped the streets entirely. Not many, but some. Allegra's girls are a mix, former streetwalkers, failed maids, runaway wives. A few who never had to sell their bodies but know they're one bad month away from it. They're tough, fast-talking and fiercely loyal to Allegra. You're not one of them yet, but you're getting closer. You learn to paint your lips without smudging, to raise an eyebrow just enough to make the crowd lean forward. You don't sing, not yet, but you recite monologues, funny little sketches with suggestive winks and punchlines that make old men blush. And when you bow, they clap. For you. One night, you spot a familiar face in the crowd, Miss Mayfair, sitting near the back sipping something clear from a crystal flask. She meets your eyes, tilts her head just slightly, and offers you a slow smile. Not approval, not surprise, just acknowledgement. You feel a little taller that night. Here's a strange little fringe fact. Some girls from the music hall scene went on to marry nobility. Seriously. One even married a lord who didn't know her stage name was the same one she used at a brothel 3 years earlier. The masks were that convincing. Or maybe the men just didn't care to look too closely. There's still danger, of course. Some clients don't understand the difference between performance and invitation. Some nights end with girls bruised behind the curtain. Allegra deals with them swiftly. Her rules are clear. Touch without permission. And you leave with fewer teeth than you came in with. Scholars love to debate whether music halls were empowering or exploitative. You've read both sides. One side says it gave women a voice. The other says it simply gave men a new stage to leer from. But here's what you know. When you're under the spotlight, you're not a whore. You're not a cautionary tale. You're not even a girl from the Rookery. You're a character, and characters get to write their own endings. That night will be it. You walk home humming a song you heard from the back row. Mary's waiting for you, curled up by the fire, her cough worse but her smile steady. You looked like someone else tonight, she says. Good, you whisper. I'm tired of being me. You don't notice at first, not really. The little shifts blend into the smoggy blur of days. A coin pressed into your hand instead of tossed. A nod from a constable who used to look through you. A drunk in the pub calling you miss instead of you there. Small things, stupid things, but they add up. You're not a ghost anymore. It's Mary who says it. One night after you've peeled off your wig and kicked off your stage shoes with a groan, you're both sitting cross-legged on the floor, splitting a meat pie that tastes like regret and lard. You're turning into one of them, she says, not unkindly. You raise an eyebrow. Them who? She waves a hand. The cheeky ones, the ones who get away with it. You laugh. I still sleep on a floor with a bucket for a toilet. Yeah, she says, grinning, but you do it with flair. She's not wrong. Something has shifted. You're still broke, still bruised, still counting every farthing. But you have an audience now. And an audience is its own kind of power. You're learning how to use it too, how to pause just long enough before a punchline to make the laugh louder. How to look over your shoulder as you leave a room so they remember your back as much as your face. You're surviving. But more than that, you're performing your survival. And somehow that makes it easier to bear. Allegra sees it too. She starts giving you better slots. Not headliner, not yet, but you're no longer just the sad girl who's decent with a monologue. You're developing a character. Sharp-tongued, quick-witted, just a little too clever for the men in the front row. They love it. They think they're in on the joke. They don't realise they are the joke. It becomes your armour. But the thing about armour is that it hides bruises just as well as it deflects blows. And inside, you're still raw. Mary's cough is worse, deep now, wet. There's blood on her handkerchief, but she hides it like it's a sin. You try not to panic, but the fear drips in slow and quiet, like rain through a leaky roof. She won't go back to St. Bridget's, says she'd rather die in her own clothes. You find yourself watching her sleep more often, counting the space between her breaths. One night, when the air is thick and sour, she tells you a story, out of nowhere. I used to have a dog, she says, back when I was still living with my mum. Stupid thing, ugly as sin, but it would wait for me at the gate every day after school. You smile. What happened to it? She shrugs. The same thing that happens to most soft things in London. Neither of you speak for a while. Do you ever think we're funny? She asks finally. How do you mean? I mean, all this, the dancing, the jokes, the corsets. We make them laugh, make them want us. Then we go back to rooms with broken windows and piss in a tin bucket. You let out a breath. I think it's tragic. Same thing. You don't correct her, she's not wrong. Here's your historical fact. By the 1880s, the concept of the fallen woman had become a full-blown cultural obsession. Novels, sermons, political speeches. Everyone had a theory, everyone had an opinion. Everyone wanted to talk about these women, how they fell, why they fell, but whether they could be lifted. Few ever asked the women themselves. That would have been too messy. You and Mary talk more now, not about hope exactly, but about absurdity. You invent games like, what would you do with a duke's fortune? The answers get increasingly ridiculous. A gold bathtub shaped like a swan. A butler who only speaks in limericks. A private carriage drawn by drunk geese. You both laugh so hard once you cry, which feels good, until the crying won't stop. Sometimes Floss joins in. She tells you she used to play music as a child, a piano in some dusty parlour. Her fingers remember the keys, even if her life doesn't. I play in my head sometimes, she says. Helps when I can't sleep. You tell her she should come to the hall, maybe find a real piano. She snorts. I'd rather lick the gutter. That's the thing about your little group. You all wear sarcasm like a corset. Tight, painful, but it holds you up. Here's a quirky bit of history for your late-night trivia brain. In the music hall scene, some performers became so beloved that when they died, their funeral processions stopped traffic for hours. Thousands lined the streets, newspaper boys wept, and all for a girl who once got paid a penny to flash her ankle. Fame, in London, had strange rules, but you're not famous, not yet. Still, there are whispers now. A gentleman in the third row asking your name. A girl backstage asking how you hold the crowd so still. Allegra gives you a look one night that lingers longer than usual. You're getting better, she says. Don't let it go to your head. I can't afford to, you say. She smirks. That's when it's safest. There's a scholarly debate you think about sometimes now, whether the women of Victorian London's underclass had any true agency at all, or whether their every choice was simply the least awful option available. Are you performing because you chose to, or because it's the only way not to drown? You don't know. You don't care. What matters is that for now, you have a voice, and it is loud enough to echo off the walls. That night, you do something bold. After your set, still flushed with adrenaline, you head out back where the men linger. You spot the one in the velvet coat who tipped the heaviest. You tell him your name, your real one. He smiles, not leering, not possessive, just surprised, and for once, it feels like a choice. You return home to find Mary asleep, curled like a comma on the floor, her blanket slipping. You pull it back over her shoulder and press a kiss to her temple. She stirs, smiles, eyes still shut. You're cheeky now, she murmurs. Only sometimes, you whisper back. Good, stay that way. And you promise, quietly, fiercely into the dark, that you will. Because if you lose your cheek, you lose the fight. And you're not done fighting yet. The sickness isn't quiet anymore. It rattles Mary's lungs like someone shaking coins in a tin. Day and night it claws its way up her throat, leaving the blood on her lips and fear in your chest. No one says it outright, but you all know what it is now. The real name, the heavy one. Consumption. The word lands like ash every time it's whispered. And in a place like yours, where windows don't close and blankets are shared, it spreads like gossip. She's still Mary, still making jokes between coughs, still trying to get up and be useful, as she puts it. But her steps are smaller now, her silence is longer. You bring her food she barely touches. She says it's the taste. You know it's the exhaustion. The worst part? No one's surprised. Not really. You ask Allegra if she can help. If she knows a doctor or a home, or someone with a soft bed and a kind face. I know a few places, she says, avoiding your eyes. But kindness costs more than coin these days. Still, she sends a man to look in on Mary, a real doctor or close enough. He smells like clove oil and onions. His hands are warm and dispassionate. He presses on her chest, listens to her breathing, then packs up his bag like she's already been buried. Keep her warm, he says. Keep her clean. Nothing else to be done. You want to scream. Instead, you thank him. Because that's what you do when you're powerless. You put on a polite voice and swallow the rage like medicine. That night, Mary asks you to read to her. Not the Bible, not anything worthy, just one of the penny dreadfuls Floss keeps hidden under the floorboard. The one about the highwayman who falls in love with a barmaid and fakes his death by hiding in a barrel of cider. It's ridiculous and sweet and has far too many scenes where someone swoons. But she listens, smiling, eyelids fluttering. You make your voice soft, you make the words stretch, you want her to fall asleep before the chapter ends. She doesn't. I think I'd like to die dramatic, she says afterward quietly. On stage maybe, in a red dress, swooning into someone's arms. You're not dying, you lie. She laughs. It sounds like a cough trying to pretend. You sit with her all night. Not because she needs it, though she does, but because you do. You can't bear to close your eyes. Not yet. Sleep feels greedy. Here's your historical fact for the hour. Tuberculosis, consumption, was so common in Victorian England that it became romanticised. Poets, painters, even doctors described it as the wasting disease, a condition that gave its victims a pale, delicate beauty. Women with TB were considered tragically lovely, like flowers left out in frost. Never mind the fever, the blood, the suffocating horror of it. Society preferred the aesthetics. There's even a theory, dark and strangely plausible, that some women faked the symptoms, a touch of pale powder, a drawn look, a light cough. Because to be consumptive was to be soft, fragile, desirable. It made you art. It made you memorable. You think of that as you wipe blood from Mary's lip. She doesn't look fragile. She looks like someone fighting hard to stay visible in a world already looking past her. The next day, Allegra lets you miss your shift. She needs you more than the audience, she says. It feels like the most generous thing anyone's done in weeks. Still, the music hall pulls at you. Not because it's fun, but because it's order. The stage is the only place where you know what comes next. A cue, a line, a laugh. Mary's sickness doesn't follow a script. You return the following night. Your voice feels shaky. Your smile isn't sharp enough. But the audience doesn't notice. They never do. They see what they want. A pretty face with a cheeky line. A tragedy wrapped in lace. When it's over, you find Vera in the dressing room painting her lips in a mirror that's more rust than glass. "How do you keep going, Thaddeus?" you ask her. She blots her lips, shrugs. "Easy. We keep going until we don't." Here's a fringe detail to turn over in your brain like a coin. Some brothels and music halls kept sick rooms for girls like Mary. Not to heal them, just to keep them out of sight. Clients didn't like reminders. They came for fantasy, not reality. The sick were hidden away, sometimes drugged into silence. Sometimes simply, forgotten. You won't let that happen. Back at the flat, Mary's sleeping again. Her breathing is thin, like silk tearing. You sit beside her with a cool cloth, brushing her forehead. She stirs once and mumbles something about gingerbread. You promise to find her some tomorrow, even if you have to steal it. There's a scholarly debate about this kind of care. Mutual aid in poverty, they call it. Some say the sisterhood among women in the trade was mythologized, exaggerated by later writers looking for heart in all the grit. Others insist it was real, that women like you and Mary built a web of survival out of nothing but kindness and necessity. You know where you stand on that one. Kindness isn't weakness, it's rebellion. Especially here, especially now. In the morning you wake before the sun, slip out into the market with your coat pulled tight and your hair unbrushed. You steal a piece of gingerbread from a cart while the vendor argues with a constable over stolen apples. You run all the way back. Mary's still asleep. You place the gingerbread on the table beside her and sit down, breathless. You don't wake her yet, you just wait. Because for now, you still can. The gingerbread goes untouched. You try to believe it's just because she's tired, that she'll wake up and nibble the edges, make some snide comment about it being too dry or too soft or not enough bite for something meant to be sweet. But the truth sits in the corner of the room like a shadow that's always watching. Mary's not getting better. And all your stories, all your borrowed lace and stage lights, can't trick her lungs into working the way they used to. You stay with her for days, coming and going between the flat and the music hall, always checking the sky, always watching the windows for signs. Light on, movement, breath. Every time you turn the knob, you brace for silence. You try not to look desperate. You fail. The girls start picking up your slack. Floss takes your Wednesday slot. Vera, of all people, brings a stew that smells like overcooked carrots but makes Mary eat 2 spoonfuls. Lottie combs Mary's hair when she's too tired to lift her arms. No one says much, but the help arrives without asking, because this is how it works. You take care of your own, or you don't last. Still, you can't shake the feeling that you're on a clock, that something's ticking louder with every breath Mary takes. She's shrinking into herself now, ribs visible beneath her gown, fingers colder each day. You light a fire even when there's no coal, tearing pages from old newspapers and penny novels to keep the flame alive. The irony doesn't escape you, burning the stories you both love to make sure she stays warm enough to keep writing her own. One night she asks you, voice thin and strange, "Do you think they'll remember me?" You blink. "Who?" "Anyone." You want to say yes. Of course, how could they not? She's Mary, she's brilliant, she's fierce and funny and sang that filthy version of God Save the Queen that got you both kicked out of a pub last year. But you've seen how quickly London forgets. You've walked past girls who disappeared without even a dent left in the cobblestone. So you do something else. You lie. They'll never forget you, you say. They'll tell your stories like parables. They'll name alley cats after you. She laughs. It turns into a cough. You'll tell them. I'll tell everyone. Here's your historical fact. Victorian rescue homes and hospitals were not required to keep detailed records of the women who passed through or passed away. Many women died anonymously, buried in paupers' graves with no markers, their names never written down. The system was designed to wipe them clean, quietly, efficiently, and Mary doesn't want that. She wants a story, a legacy, no matter how small. So you start writing, not a novel, not a play, just a collection of little things, phrases she says, memories you shared, how she hummed lullabies into a cracked teacup when she thought no one was listening. You write on scraps of paper, receipts, even the backs of old posters from the music hall. You keep them in a tin box beneath your pillow. That becomes your ritual. Every night, one new scrap. Sometimes funny, sometimes heartbreaking, sometimes just a single word that sounds like her. You start telling people stories about her too, to Vera. Did you know Mary once slapped a man with a frozen herring? To Floss. She stole a bishop's watch once, gave it to a chimney sweep just because he smiled at her. To Lottie. She believed the Thames could whisper secrets, but only if you were patient. Some of it's even true. Quirky fact for you, there were women in the 1800s who made their living composing fictional biographies for prostitutes. Seriously. A client would pay extra for a backstory. Childhood, lost love, tragic accident. They'd present it to friends like gossip. You wouldn't believe what she's been through, they'd say. It was part of the theatre, part of the transaction. But you're not making Mary's story for sale. You're making it so she won't vanish. The days blur. Sometimes she sleeps for hours. Sometimes she wakes with fever dreams and calls you by the wrong name. Once she tries to get up, insists she needs to sweep the floor. You gently push her back down. She cries, quietly, like she's embarrassed. "Just don't want to be dead weight," she mutters. "You're not," you say. "You're the fire." She smiles at that, even if it's cracked around the edges. There's a scholarly debate that always sticks in your craw, the one about whether women in poverty were truly voiceless or whether their voices were simply ignored. Some academics say they left no records. Others say the records were there, just not written in ink. You think Mary's voice could fill a library if anyone had bothered to listen. So you become the library. Each story you tell, each scrap you write, it builds a small monument. Not stone, not bronze, just memory. You find yourself reciting them on stage without meaning to, slipping a Maryism into a sketch, telling us a joke she once told in the middle of a scene. The audience laughs, unaware that they're clapping for someone they'll never meet. One night after a show, a man offers you a tip and says, "You've got a wicked tongue on you. Who taught you to talk like that?" You pocket the coin. "A queen," you say. He laughs, not understanding. But you do. Back at the flat, Mary's sleeping again. Breaths shallow, hand curled around that ridiculous chipped teacup like it's her sceptre. You sit beside her. You watch. You wait. Because no matter what the stories say, queens don't die alone. Not on your watch. The room is quiet. Not the good kind. Not the kind that comes after laughter or fills the space between two people who know each other well enough not to speak. This is the heavy kind, the kind that sits on your chest and makes your ears ring, like your body knows what happened before your brain catches up. Mary died sometime before dawn, and you knew it was coming. Everyone did. Her body had been giving you signs for weeks, the cough that never softened, the breath that came in hitches, the slow fade in her eyes, like a candle dimming from the inside. But even when you were counting her ribs, even when her voice went hoarse from trying to say goodbye without saying goodbye, part of you still hoped, because people don't just leave. Not your people, but Mary did. You find her curled up the way she always slept, one arm across her chest, head tilted like she was listening to something no one else could hear. The teacup is still near her hand, the gingerbread still untouched. You touch her cheek. It's cold but not yet stiff. That matters to you for some reason. You sit beside her, knees to your chest, heart hammering like she might wake up if it's loud enough. She doesn't. You don't cry yet. Instead you move. There's no guide for this kind of grief. No official handbook on what to do when a girl dies in a flat you share with 4 others and a cat that's been missing for a week. You open the window to let out the soul. That's what Floss told you to do once, half drunk, quoting her grandmother. Otherwise it gets stuck in the curtains. You do it, just in case. Then you go to Allegra. She doesn't ask what you need, she just gives you a key. There's a room at the end of the hall, she says. It was used for costumes once, no one goes in there now. You take Mary's body there that night, wrapped in her old blanket, carried with the quiet reverence of someone who's done this too many times. Floss helps, so does Lottie. Vera doesn't come, but she sends a bottle of something strong and clear, with a label so worn you can't tell if it's medicine or poison. Doesn't matter. In that little room above the music hall, you lay Mary out like royalty. You wash her face, brush her hair, dress her in the green gown she wore that one night she almost got a marriage proposal from a man with too many rings and not enough teeth. You find a ribbon and tie it around her wrist. She looks peaceful, not tragic, just still. And then you cry. It comes all at once, quiet at first, then loud, gutting. You shake with it, not for the drama, not for anyone to see, just because she's gone, and you don't know how to carry the weight of her absence. You cry until your throat burns. Here's your historical fact. In Victorian England, working-class funerals were often paid for with pooled pennies. Entire neighbourhoods would chip in to cover the cost of a coffin, even if it meant skipping meals. It wasn't about religion or reputation, it was about dignity. Even the poorest deserved a proper end. You don't have enough for a funeral, none of you do. So you make one up. You light candles stolen from backstage. You place her in the centre of the room like she's about to go on for her final performance. The girls gather around. No hymns, just stories. One by one you share them. The time she flirted with a priest just to get free soup. The time she stole a constable's hat and wore it like a crown for a week. The time she danced in the rain with her skirt hiked up singing a bawdy tune while people stared like she was mad, and she laughed and said, "Good, let 'em think it." Each memory becomes a brick, and you build her a monument of words. Then as the candlelight fades, you all go quiet. You don't know what to do with the body. That's the next terrible truth. You can't afford a grave, you can't leave her out for the death carts. She's not refusal, so you go to the river. It's not dramatic, no cloaked ceremony, just the dead of night. A rowboat borrowed from a man Allegra once charmed out of 2 favours and a free drink, and 3 girls who refused to let their friend be forgotten. You row her out in sonnets, wrap her in her blanket, tie the ends so she won't float back. Say something, Floss whispers. You do. You say the thing Mary asked you to say. You were fire, you whisper, voice cracking, and no one ever put you out. Then slowly you let her go. The river takes her, quiet and cold. She disappears beneath the surface like she was never there. But she was. You know she was. Here's a strange, nearly forgotten fact. Some women in Mary's position made their friends promise to dispose of their bodies without the authorities ever finding them. Because if the system found them, they became records. Or worse, cautionary tales. To vanish was, in some twisted way, a final act of autonomy. Mary vanished by choice, and you helped her. Later, back at the flat, you open the tin box beneath your pillow. You read the scraps, you add one more. She danced in puddles and never asked for permission. You fold it, add it to the pile. There's a scholarly debate about legacy, about whether it belongs to the dead or the living, whether remembering someone is about honouring them or about trying to make your own pain smaller. You think it's both. You don't care what the professors say. Mary's gone, but she's still yours. And tomorrow, when you go on stage, you'll steal one of her old lines. Just for her. You're standing on the corner near Whitechapel when you hear the first words spoken in German. It's a harsh sound in a city that's already full of noise, but this is different. Not the clipped accent of a well-heeled Prussian tourist, or the loose mutter of a merchant in the Jewish quarter, but something cracked and breathless. A girl's voice. You turn, and there she is. She's barely older than you, face flushed with panic and a hand clutched around the strap of a threadbare satchel. Her boots are falling apart. Her dress was fine once, you can tell, but now it's been washed too many times in cold water and wrung out with hands that shook. She speaks again, louder now, and the words don't quite land right on her tongue. Bitte. Bitte. Hilfe? She's lost. You step closer. She flinches. You raise your hands gently, like you're trying not to spook a horse. You speak English. A pause, then a shaky, a little. She's shaking now, and you're not sure if it's the cold or fear, or both. You know that look. You wore it once, not too long ago, standing on a London street with empty pockets and no name that anyone here wanted to say right. You take her back to the flat. Floss frowns, but doesn't argue. She makes her a cup of tea and adds just enough sugar to pretend you're not out of milk. The girl, her name is Mina, sits curled on the edge of the mattress like she's not sure she's allowed to put weight on it. You notice her hands, too clean. Her nails are trimmed. Still pale. She hasn't been here long. How did you get here, you ask. Ship, she says. Southampton, I work. Was told better work in London. You exchange a glance with Floss. There's always someone promising better work in London. Later that night, while Mina sleeps, you and Floss talk in the hallway. She's fresh, Floss says. Straight off the boat. Doesn't even know where she is. Someone brought her here. Someone always does. Here's your historical fact. And it's a grim one. During the late 19th century, the trafficking of foreign women into British cities, particularly London, was quietly rampant. Most came from Eastern Europe, especially Jewish and German communities escaping poverty or pogroms. Some were promised work as maids or seamstresses. Many ended up in brothels, stripped of passports, names, and any hope of escape. You try not to think about what might have happened to Mina if you hadn't found her, or what did happen before you did. In the days that follow, she sticks close to you. She speaks more now, still halting, still uncertain, but she listens hard, learns fast. You show her how to avoid certain corners, how to spot a copper from a block away, how to keep your money stitched inside your skirt hem. She laughs at your jokes, even the bad ones. She tries on one of Mary's old shawls, stares at herself in the cracked mirror like she's not sure the reflection belongs to her. Floss pulls you aside one afternoon and says, "You're getting soft." You raise an eyebrow. "I've always been soft." "Oh, yes, yeah," she mutters. "But now it's dangerous." She's not wrong. You feel it too, the tug in your chest when Mina smiles. The way you instinctively shield her when a man walks too close. You're not her mother, not her sister. But you've become something between protector and translator, and that scares you more than you want to admit. Because you can't protect anyone forever. You couldn't even protect Mary. Still, you keep showing her how to navigate the maze. One night you take her to the music hall, just to watch. She sits in the back, eyes wide, mouth open in wonder. When a girl steps out in a gold dress and sings a bawdy ballad that ends in a cartwheel, Mina actually gasps. You smile. You'd forgotten what wonder looked like. Allegra notices. Of course she does. After the show, she corners you backstage. The girl's yours. Sort of. She's clean? Yes. Does she sing? Not that I know of. Allegra leans in, her voice low. Keep her close. Someone's already asked about her. You stiffen. Who? Allegra shakes her head. Some businessman. Said she was looking for work. Said her name like it belonged to him. You swallow hard. That night you teach Mina how to use a knife. Not how to fight, she's not ready for that. But how to hold it. Where to hide it. Where to stab if she ever had to. You hate doing it. You do it anyway. Here's a fringe fact from the gutters of history. Some immigrant women, especially in the East End, formed the small protection circles. Not quite gangs, more like packed sisterhoods. They watched out for each other, pooled what little they had, and passed around information like gold. Where not to work, who not to trust, what places would let you sleep near the fire if you promised not to steal. You start building one of your own. You, Mina, Floss, Lottie. Vera, each scarred in a different place. You share bread, secrets, needles, laughter, and stories. You teach Mina how to tell them. She's clumsy at it at first, her English gets tangled, her punchlines misfire, but she tries, and she glows when people laugh. You ask her, once, what she wanted to be before London happened. Teacher, she says, for children. You picture her in a classroom, hair pinned back, chalk dust on her skirt, voice calm and confident. Then you picture her now, learning how to flirt just enough to stay safe, how to fold her dreams into a joke so no one sees the hope. You nod. You'd have been a good one. She smiles. I still can, she says. Maybe. There's a scholarly debate about immigrant women in the sex trade, whether they were more vulnerable or more resourceful than their native-born counterparts. Some records suggest they faced greater danger, isolation, abuse. Others say their tight-knit communities helped them endure longer, survive harder. Like everything else, it depends on who you ask, and who's writing the story. But you know this, Mina is strong, not just because she has to be, because she wants to be. She sleeps with a knife under her pillow now. And every night before you fall asleep, you check that it's still there. Because someone is still looking for her. And if they find her, they'll have to go through you first. You find the first one folded beneath a milk crate on a corner near Spitalfields Market. It's damp, torn at the edge, but the title is still legible in smudged, swooping letters. The Scarlet Dove, a true account of London's night creatures. A penny dreadful, the kind printed cheaply and sold to boys with grubby hands and wild imaginations. You almost toss it aside. Then your eye catches a line halfway down the first page. Her hair was red as the coals in a rookery hearth, her lips full of sin and sadness. She stood on the corner of Flower and Dean, waiting for forgiveness that never came. You freeze. You've stood on that corner, you know a girl with hair that colour. You know that line isn't fiction, not entirely. You take it back to the flat, lay it out on the table, like a dead bird. Mina and Floss lean in to read, squinting in the flickering lamplight. Lottie groans halfway through the first paragraph. They're making us into fables now, lovely. You read the rest in silence. It's all there. Thinly veiled versions of girls you know. Places you've slept, jokes you've told. The names are different, but the bones are the same. Vera becomes Verena. Allegra is just the Madame. And you show up near the end not named, but described in a way that makes your stomach twist. The girl with eyes like gutter water and a laugh like broken glass. She beckons with both hands and curses in 3 languages. Floss whistles. At least they got your laugh right. You try to be amused. You fail, because it's one thing to be seen. It's another to be used. You start spotting them everywhere, new ones each week. The Sins of Soho, The Angel of Aldgate, Confessions of a Music Hall Siren. The stories drip with exaggeration, full of gaslight and corsets and whispered deals in alleyways. Some of it's ridiculous, women climbing drain pipes to escape jealous lovers, madams who poison clients with opium-stuffed bonbons. But in the spaces between the nonsense, you see something more dangerous. Pieces of truth. Places only someone from your world could describe. Stories only a girl in the thick of it would know how to twist. And that's when you figure out, someone's watching, listening, recording. Not a man, not a client, a writer, maybe a woman, maybe someone you've already met and offered a joke to without realising it would end up in ink. You go to Allegra, she already knows. Of course they're writing about us, she says, arms crossed. They've always written about us. The only difference is now they're making money from it. Who is it? She shrugs. Could be anyone. Someone's cousin, someone's maid with a good memory, maybe even one of the girls. You blink. You think it's one of us? She lights a cigarette and takes a long drag before answering. You want to survive in this city? You sell what you've got. Sometimes that's your body. Sometimes it's someone else's story. You feel sick. Here's your historical fact. Uncomfortable as it is, in the mid to late 1800s, the rise of the penny dreadful turned the suffering of London's poorest, especially women, into serialised entertainment. Prostitutes, murderers, thieves, beggars, they all became characters. Morality tales and gothic tragedies wrapped in just enough fiction to avoid lawsuits. The public devoured them. It was the closest many ever got to the underbelly of the city, and if they couldn't get enough, you try not to care. You tell yourself it doesn't matter. There are just stories. People have been lying about you since the day you arrived. What's one more exaggeration? But then one shows up featuring Mina. Not by name. but unmistakably her. The scarf she always wears, the accent, the nervous habit of touching her collar when she speaks. In the story, she's a spy, a seductress, a girl who kills a man with a broken bottle and vanishes into the fog. You don't tell her, you burn that one, but it doesn't stop there. Clients start quoting the stories back to you, asking if you're her, the girl with the laugh, the girl who stabs, the girl who runs. Some even ask to reenact scenes. They slide coins across the table and want you to recite lines they think they made famous. You hate it, but the money's good. Some of the girls lean in. Floss pretends to be the Aldgate angel for an extra shilling. Vera claims she's the one who inspired Verena, and honestly, she probably is. Lottie starts dressing like one of the illustrations, low-cut blouse, ribbon around the neck like blood waiting to spill. It becomes a performance of a performance. You don't play along, not yet, but the city's changing, and you feel it. Here's a weird little fringe fact for your brain to gnaw on. Some penny dreadful authors were, in fact, former prostitutes. They wrote under pseudonyms, sold their tales to publishing houses that paid them less than a third of what men earned, and were often edited into obscurity. But for a brief moment they controlled the narrative, even if only on paper. You wonder if the person writing your story is one of you, if they're trying to protect something or if they've just found a clever new way to survive. One night you find another issue tucked beneath your stage costume. No name, just a drawing on the front. 5 women standing in a half circle laughing. One of them looks like Mary. You take it home, you don't read it. You just place it in the tin button box, folded gently next to the scraps you've written about her, because maybe, in some twisted, ridiculous way, this means she'll be remembered, even if no one gets her right. There's a scholarly debate about sensationalism in Victorian media, whether it dehumanized women or made them unforgettable, whether turning real suffering into entertainment erased truth or preserved it in code. You think about that a lot now. Every time someone calls you the gutter girl with the glass laugh, every time a man asks you if you're the one who escaped a murderer with nothing but a stiletto and a wink, every time you stare into the crowd and see someone reading you. So you do something strange. On stage, in the middle of your act, you start slipping in your own version of events, just little changes, a truth tucked into a lie, a correction wrapped in a joke. You say things that only someone who was really there would know, and slowly, you take your story back. There's a house in Fitzrovia where the curtains never open and the floors never creak, no matter how many boots stomp through it. You know this because you're invited there by a man with a signet ring and a smile so polite it feels like a trap. He meets you after a performance, not in the usual way, not the backdoor scurry or the drunken swagger of a man trying to impress. No, he walks up like your old acquaintances, like this has been scheduled and mutually agreed upon. "Miss," he says, "I represent a client with refined tastes. He wishes to make a private arrangement, discreet of course." You're tired. Mina's fever came back the night before. Your boots have a hole. You've got a headache from stage powder and not enough water. So when he says the price, your first thought is, I could fix everything with that. You say yes, not proudly, not foolishly, just yes. Because London is a machine, and tonight you're oiling the gears. The carriage comes the next night. Black as soot, curtains drawn, no coachman visible. You climb in, feeling like you've stepped into a story that someone else started writing without your permission. You ride in silence for what feels like too long, past neighbourhoods that don't smell like smoke, past houses with flower boxes that haven't been burned, past streets that never see boots like yours. Then it stops. The house is tall, proper, plain in that expensive sort of way. No brass plaques, no doorman, just a woman in a pale uniform who opens a door's door without speaking and leads you inside. Everything is quiet. Too quiet. There's music somewhere. Strings, slow and strange, but it's muffled, like it's playing underwater. The woman guides you through 2 parlours and a hallway lined with portraits of people who probably owned people, until you're left alone in a sitting room. And then he enters. Your client. He's young, that surprises you. Not young like a schoolboy. Young like someone who inherited everything and still hasn't figured out how to fill the silence in his own home. He's handsome, in a vague, unthreatening way. Pale, tidy, smelling faintly of lemon soap and too much time. He doesn't speak at first, just studies you. Then finally, you're the girl with the laugh. You nod. He pours a drink, offers you one. You accept. You don't look like the stories. Neither do you. He smiles. And just like that, it becomes a game. He doesn't want you for what you feared. No bruises, no orders. What he wants is worse in some ways. He wants conversation. He wants performance. He wants you to be the girl from the pages. Dangerous, witty, tragic, just roughing him to make him feel wild for sitting near you. You play the part, you talk, you flirt a little. He listens, hangs on every word like you're reciting scripture. And when it's time to go, he doesn't touch you. Just slips a full envelope into your hand and says, "Same time next week." You nod. You walk out with a stomach full of confusion and a pocket full of rent. Here's your historical fact for the night. Kept women in Victorian London weren't just a myth. Entire arrangements existed, quiet, often unspoken, between wealthy men and women from the lower classes. Some were formal, with stipends and furnished flats. Some were casual. All hush and gloved handshakes. The key was discretion, respectability, maintaining the illusion of power and virtue. You don't tell the others at first. You don't want the looks, the jokes, the curiosity. This feels different. Not exactly worse, not exactly better. Just complicated. Each week you return. Sometimes you talk about books. Sometimes he wants to hear about your childhood, so you lie. Paint a version of your past filled with chimney smoke and violin music and heartbreak in 6 acts. He eats it up. You don't feel powerful, but you don't feel powerless either. You feel performed. Eventually, you ask him why he's paying for this. He looks startled, then says, "'Cause you're interesting." You want to laugh, you don't. Here's a fringe fact for the curious. Victorian courtesans, the high-end ones, were often educated, taught to read, play piano, quote poetry, They weren't selling their bodies so much as their company, their image, their persona. Some kept diaries still buried in archives, the ones that weren't burned. Your diary lives in your head, on stage, in Mina's grin, in the stories Mary left behind. Back at the flat, Mina's health teeters between fragile and worse. The fever breaks, then returns. She sleeps more now, talks less. You read to her when you can, half from books, half from the latest dreadfuls, which you alter to make the heroines cleverer, the endings kinder. Floss figures out your arrangement. "You've got cleaner shoes these days," she says one night, not looking up from her stitching, "and your coat doesn't smell like piss anymore." You don't deny it. She doesn't judge. Just don't start talking like you're better than the rest of us, that's all. You won't. You can't. Because you know what happens when girls climb too high in this city. They fall harder. There's a scholarly debate about power dynamics in these relationships, whether women with arrangements had agency, or were just swallowing gilded shackles. Some argue they were manipulating men for survival. Others say they were simply better dressed victims. You think the truth is in the space between the envelope and the exit. At the end of your 4th visit, he gives you a necklace. Simple, silver. Nothing gaudy. For you, he says, because you've been lovely. You stare at it. Think of Mary's scarf. Think of Mina's knife. Think of the teeth behind every smile you've ever worn. You take it. But you also slip a line into your next performance at the music hall. The difference between a cage and a cradle is how tightly you're held. Allegra laughs from the wings. The audience doesn't get it, but someone will. Someday. You tuck the necklace into your drawer. You keep going. Because that's the trick. You keep going. It's Vera who gets taken. You hear about it the next morning from a boy who sometimes runs errands for Allegra in exchange for bread and a wink. He comes pounding up the stairs to the flat, face pale under a smudge of coal, panting hard enough to worry you. "They got her," he says. "The bobbies. I jerked her out of the Star and Crown." You don't believe him at first. Vera? She's the careful one, the one who keeps her boots polished and her name clean. She talks to constables like she's doing them a favour. She once talked her way out of a fine by threatening to cough on a judge's hat, but the boy's shaking. "They said she was soliciting," he says. "Public decency charge." You stare at him. "And they needed 6 men for that?" He swallows. "They didn't even let her finish her drink." You leave Mina with Floss and run to the Star and Crown. The barmaid confirms it. 4 of them in uniform, 2 in plain clothes. Said they had reason to believe, didn't show a paper. Just hauled her off. You go to the station. They turn you away. "Nothing to discuss," the constable says, not looking up from his papers. "She'll be processed like any other." You ask what she's charged with. "Loitering with intent." You laugh. It's bitter and sharp. "She was drinking, not loitering." He shrugs. "Intent's in the eye of the law." Here's your historical fact. In 1824, Britain passed the Vagrancy Act, making it illegal to be a suspected person or reputed thief. Translation: if you looked like trouble, that was enough. By the Victorian era, this act had become a favourite weapon against the poor, the homeless, and especially women in the trade. Loitering with intent to solicit didn't require proof, just suspicion, and women like Vera gave the law all the suspicion it needed. Back at the music hall, Allegra is livid. You've never seen her this close to cracking. She throws a glass against the wall and watches it shatter, like it owed her money. "They've been watching her," she mutters. "They've been watching all of us." You ask what happens now. She doesn't answer. That night the mood is off. The girls are nervous. The crowd is rowdy, louder than usual, demanding more skin, more sass, more everything. You try to do your set, but your voice catches halfway through a line about a widow and a candlestick, and you barely manage to pull a laugh from the room. Afterward, a man corners you by the curtain. Well-dressed, smiling. He touches your arm. "You're much better in person," he says. "I was afraid the stories were exaggerating." You pull away. They usually are. He doesn't move, just leans in closer. "You know, they're cracking down on this kind of filth," he whispers. "Won't be long now, you girls will be out of business." "Funny," you reply. "You don't look unemployed." He laughs. The kind of laugh that curls like smoke. "I'm a man, I don't have to be decent. I just have to pay." You want to hit him, but instead you smile and leave, because tonight, survival is smarter than satisfaction. Here's a fringe fact from the ink-stained edges of Victorian law. Some brothels paid bribes to the police in exchange for silence. Fines collected quietly. Deals made in hallways and over half-drunk pints. But if a madam refused to pay, or if someone higher up needed a scapegoat, raids could come fast, violent, public, convenient. You walk home fast. That night the flat feels smaller. Mina's asleep, one arm over her eyes like she's hiding from a dream. Floss is pacing. "They're coming for all of us," she says, bit by bit. You sit down. "Not if we stay invisible." Floss shakes her head. "We're already in the papers, in the stories. We're already known. We're symbols now, you think about that." About the drawings in the Penny Dreadfuls, the girls turned into cautionary tales, the way they die in every issue, beautifully and tragically, like that's the only end allowed. The next morning you go back to the station. You bring money. A bribe, not much, but enough to make a point. They laugh in your face. "She's already been processed," the desk sergeant says. "Headed for Newgate." You go cold, Newgate prison. That's not just a holding cell, that's a sentence. Vera's not the kind of girl who survives prison. She's too proud, too mouthy, too beautiful in a way that draws attention even when she tries not to. You go to Allegra. She's already writing a letter. "To a magistrate," she says. "One of mine. From years back. He owes me." You nod. "Can he get her out?" Allegra hesitates. "If he wants to." Later that day, a story comes out in a weekly paper. You don't know who wrote it. The byline is a fake. But the headline grabs you by the throat. "Prostitutes and Poison. The Secret Lives of London's Soiled Doves." The story mentions a woman arrested in Fitzrovia for loitering with intent. The same words used on Vera. The details are fictionalised, of course. She's turned into a murderess with a grudge against the church, but the truth is underneath, pulsing like a bruise. The public will love it. They'll eat it up between sips of tea, clucking over the dangers of the city. Never once thinking to ask if the girl in the story is real, is alive. There's a scholarly debate too, because of course there is, about the media's role in criminal justice, about whether stories like this inflamed moral panic or simply exposed what everyone already knew. But in your world, stories create the truth. They shape the charges. They tilt the judge's brow. And right now, Vera's being crushed beneath someone else's narrative. You go home and write your own. One line, then another. It's not fiction, it's memory. It's the first time you've written about someone before they die, and you swear to whatever gods still listen from the rooftops of London that it won't be the last. The ward reeks of vinegar and despair. It's the kind of smell that gets into your lungs and sticks there like it's trying to become part of your breathing. You've waited hours to get inside. The matron said no visitors, then only family, then 5 minutes if you don't make a scene. You didn't argue. You just stood there, still as stone, clutching the wrapped bundle in your arms. A coat Vera left behind, her favourite one, the one with the hidden pocket for knives and notes and coins she'd never admit to hiding. They lead you down a corridor lined with rusting beds and whispering women. Some of them are bandaged, some are coughing, some are just staring at nothing. A few of them are too young, a few are too old, all of them are forgotten, and then there's Vera. She's at the far end, in a bed that looks like it was dragged from a military surplus. Her wrists are bound to the rails, not tightly, not like a prisoner, but enough to remind her who's in charge. Her eyes flutter open when you say her name. She's pale, thinner than she was even last week, her cheekbones sharp enough to slice through the air. Her hair's been shaved down to a ragged stubble, like they were trying to remove something contagious. "Don't cry," she croaks. You weren't going to, but now it's too late. A tear rolls down your cheek before you can stop it. "I brought your coat." She laughs, or tries to. It comes out as a rattle. "I bet it's ruined," she whispers. "Only a little." You sit by the bed and reach for her hand. She winces when you touch it, like even skin has turned traitor. But she doesn't pull away. "I don't remember how I got here," she says after a moment. "Last thing I remember, I was at the station, then the needles, then the baths." You nod. You've heard stories about what happens to women in the venereal wards. The tests, the treatments, the forced isolation, the lies written in charts no one ever reads aloud. Here's your historical fact. Starting in the 1860s, under the Contagious Diseases Acts, women suspected of prostitution could be detained and forcibly examined for signs of venereal disease. If they were found to have syphilis or gonorrhea, they were confined to lock hospitals, many of them little more than prisons. Men were not subjected to the same laws. Of course they weren't. You ask Vera if anyone's told her how long she'll be kept. She shakes her head. "Till I'm clean," they said. "But you can't clean out all the dirt, can you?" She laughs again. It hurts to hear. She tells you that on her first night, another girl tried to climb out the window. They found her halfway across the roof in her nightgown, whispering for her mother. They dragged her back by her ankles. No one's seen her since. You stay for as long as they let you, which isn't long. When the matron returns and clicks her tongue, you rise and squeeze Vera's hand one more time. "Tell Allegra she was right," Vera mutters. "This city eats its prettiest things first." You promise to visit again. You don't know if you'll be allowed. You walk home numb. The city doesn't seem to notice what it's done. The gas lamps flicker like nothing's changed. The bells ring. The carriages roll past. But something inside you has been cracked wide open. You don't go back to the music hall that night. You go to the pub where Vera was arrested. You stand in the corner she was dragged from. You memorize the pattern of the cracked tiles on the floor. You look at the stool she never got to finish her drink on. Then you take a piece of chalk and write her name on the wall in tall, careful letters. Vera. That's it. Nothing else. No titles. No apologies. Just her. Here's a grim fringe fact, almost forgotten by history. Many of the women confined to these hospitals weren't even sick. Some were simply suspected or had been marked by rival girls or bitter men. Once accused, their word meant nothing. Their bodies became evidence, their silence, guilt. You start asking questions, quietly at first. You ask Allegra how many girls she's lost to the wards. She doesn't answer with a number, she just closes her eyes. You ask Mina if she knows any other girls who disappeared like that in Berlin. She nods once. 2. Never saw again. You ask Floss if she'd ever let herself be taken. Only over my corpse, she says. It becomes the thing none of you talk about, but all of you plan for. You keep your legs clean, your lips rouged, your breath sweetened, because sick isn't just an illness anymore. It's a sentence. You visit Vera again the next week. They let you in for 10 minutes this time. She's weaker. Her teeth look too big for her face now, but she still manages a smile. "I wrote a poem," she says. You brace yourself. "It's terrible," she adds. You laugh. She recites it anyway. It's about a pigeon and revenge. You try to commit every line to memory. You ask if you can write it down. She nods. You take a stub of pencil from your pocket and scribble the words onto the back of a train timetable. You read it back to her. She corrects a word, and for just a moment, she's Vera again. Not a patient, not a prisoner, not a statistic, a woman with a poem. There's a scholarly debate about the ethics of institutional medicine in this period. Some historians argue the doctors meant well, that the state was trying to protect soldiers from disease to maintain public health. Others call it exactly what it was: control, punishment, fear disguised as progress. You know what it is. It's a slow disappearance. and you're not letting Vera vanish, so you start slipping her name into your acts. Not obviously, just mentions anecdotes, a turn of phrase. A girl I know once said, "My friend Vera told me, you don't say she's locked up, you say she's away, but you say her every night. Because that's how you keep someone alive." That and poems about pigeons. Rain comes down like judgment, slapping the rooftops, streaking the windows with filth, and turning the streets into sluggish rivers of mud and soot. You watch from the windowsill of the flat, legs pulled up to your chest, Mina curled asleep behind you. Her breath is even, shallow. She's been sick again. Nothing as sharp as Mary, nothing that steals her breath for good, but enough to keep her quiet for days. The knife still sleeps under her pillow. You check it sometimes, just to be sure. You haven't seen Vera in 10 days. They've stopped letting you in. Health precautions, they say. Quarantine. There's always a new excuse. You send messages. You bribe a nurse. You try going through a back entrance and nearly get arrested for your trouble. So now you wait. And the waiting burns. Floss tries to distract you. She tells you jokes so terrible they loop back around to funny. She brings home a mangled bouquet of flowers she swiped from a cemetery bin. "Dead people don't mind sharing," she says. You laugh because that's what you're supposed to do, but it doesn't stop the coil of dread winding tighter in your belly. At the music hall, everything's louder lately. The crowds drink more. The jokes get raunchier. The girls are working harder, longer, teeth gritted and smiles pasted on like face paint. It's as if everyone knows something's coming, and the only thing to do is squeeze every last coin from the present before it collapses. You've taken to doing Mary's old bow at the end of your act. 1 foot behind the other, head dipped just enough to look coy. A few regulars have started cheering it like it's your signature. You let them think it is, let them clap, let them think they know you. They don't. No one does. That night, Allegra pulls you aside backstage. Her eyes are bloodshot, not from tears, you've never seen her cry, but from 1,000 sleepless nights spent stitching up a sinking ship. "She's gone," she says. You blink. "What?" "Vera. They released her. Said she walked out yesterday morning." Your heart skips. "Where is she?" Allegra's mouth tightens. "No one's seen her. They said she left alone." You don't wait. You run. You check every place she might go. The Star and Crown. The alley behind the bakery where she used to stash coins. The steps of the old chapel where she once slept after a night too drunk to stand. Nothing. No sign, not even rumours. You're about to give up when you see her. Slumped on the edge of the canal, coat wrapped tight, hood pulled low. You recognise the boots first, scuffed at the toe, patched on the heel. You call her name softly. She doesn't turn. You sit beside her, not touching, just close enough. She looks like a ghost, paler than ever. Eyes rimmed red. There's a tremor in her fingers, almost invisible, like her nerves are still remembering what happened inside those hospital walls. "I thought they'd kill me in there," she whispers. You wait. "I stopped talking after day 5. They stopped listening before that." You ask what they did to her. She shakes her head. "I'll tell you one day. Not today." Fair. You ask if she wants to come home. She doesn't answer, just stares at the water. Eventually you walk her back, slowly. She limps. You don't ask why. She leans on you once and apologises like she's broken a rule. When you get to the flat, Floss opens the door with wide eyes and no words. She just steps aside. Mina wakes and sits up, blinking sleepily. When she sees Vera, she moves over without a word. Vera curls beside her, fully dressed, coat still on. She falls asleep that way. Here's your historical fact. Many women released from venereal disease hospitals were given no money, no escort, no resources. Just a pat on the shoulder and a shove into the cold. Most had nowhere to go, some died within weeks, some were rearrested almost immediately. Revolving door of shame and silence, but Vera came home. And now you protect her like you did Mary, like you still do Mina, like you'll do for any girl who ends up in your orbit. Because there's power in keeping each other tethered. The next day you take Vera's pigeon poem and rewrite it into a sketch. It's absurd, loud, brilliant. You perform it in a feathered shawl strutting across the stage like the world's angriest bird, reenacting her revenge on a city that won't stop spitting on her. The crowd howls. You slip in one of her real lines at the end. "London don't deserve wings." The audience laughs. But a few people clap slow and thoughtful. You find Vera watching from the back, tears on her cheeks, but a smile too. She nods once. You nod back. Here's a quirky bit of fringe history for your scrapbook. At least 3 known Victorian performers built entire routines around private jokes and coded stories that only their peers would understand. The public laughed, never realising they were laughing at whispered truths wrapped in rhyme and lace. Subversion in silk. You do the same, more often now. You talk about cracked windows and fever dreams, about girls with knives under pillows and boys who mistake sadness for sass, about pigeons and canals and hospitals that smell like vinegar. No one notices, or maybe they do. Maybe they just choose not to look too closely. That's the magic of the stage. Truth can wear a costume and still be real. There's a scholarly debate, of course, about whether the stage ever empowered women like you or just exploited you differently. Were you seen or just sold? Were the laughs your own, or did they belong to the men who paid to hear them? You think about that every time you step into the spotlight, and then you speak anyway, louder than ever. You're sitting on the rooftop one night, boots dangling over the edge, breath fogging in the August air that smells more like soot than summer, when Mina asks you the question, what would you do if you weren't this? You look over at her. She's got her arms tucked around her knees, her chin resting on a scarf that used to belong to Mary. She's not looking at you, she's looking out, at the maze of chimneys and crooked rooftops and gas lamps flickering like fireflies too tired to fly. You don't answer right away, not because you don't know, but because saying it aloud makes it feel further away. Right, you say finally. Mina turns her head, curious. Books, she asks, or plays? Stories, you say, maybe both. Something people keep, something they can hold. She thinks about that for a moment. I think I'd paint, she says, but not real things, just dreams. You glance at her sideways. You already live in one. She laughs, low and warm. Then I'd make it better. And just like that, the silence stretches again, softer this time, like a warm coat, the kind that makes you forget how cold the night is. Here's your historical fact. Despite popular belief, literacy among working-class Victorian women was higher than many assume. Girls in charity schools, workhouses, even brothels were often taught to read and write, if only so they could manage ledgers, letters, or scripture. But creative writing, storytelling, that was seen as a luxury, a man's pursuit, or worse, frivolous. You've never had a journal of your own, too risky, too tempting for other people's hands. But lately, you've started hiding pays beneath the floorboards, scraps of stories, sketches of nights that made you feel real. The night Mary coughed blood into your palm and apologised. The first time Mina made you laugh so hard you nearly dropped a bottle. The evening Vera sat down at the piano in the hall's forgotten wing and played 4 perfect notes before bursting into tears. There are not stories with neat endings, but they're yours. Lately the mood in London has shifted again. The crackdowns have slowed. Not stopped. Never that. But the raids are fewer, the whispers softer. Maybe because Parliament is busy fighting itself over taxes. Maybe because a famous man was caught visiting a house that wasn't his, and now everyone's pretending not to see too much. The music hall is thriving. Audiences are bigger, rowdier, more desperate to laugh, and Allegra says it's because people need distraction. You know better. People want reflection. They just want it with better lighting. You're part of a trio now. You, Mina and Floss, taking the stage together once a week as the Ragged Roses. It started as a one-time joke. Mina wore a pink bonnet 2 sizes too big. Floss carried a mop like a lover, and you did your monologue while balancing a candle on your head. It shouldn't have worked, but the crowd roared, so you kept doing it. You're up there, doing a sketch about a widow who talks to her dead husband's ghost through a teacup, when someone in the front row stands up and points at Mina. "There she is!" the man shouts. Everything stops. It's the man from months ago, the one Allegra warned you about. Too tall, too clean, his accent cut from Berlin's edge. You recognise the scar above his eyebrow, the colour of his coat. Mina freezes. You step in front of her. He tries to push forward, but Allegra's already there, out of the wings like smoke, blocking him with a look that could chill steel. "You're not welcome," she says, quiet and deadly. "She belongs to me," he growls. Mina's breathing is shallow now. You can hear it behind you. "No," Allegra replies. "She never did." And then the constable steps in, one you don't recognise. Tall, older, the kind who's probably seen too much and cared too little. "What's the issue here?" he asks. The man hisses something in German, then English. About theft, about desertion, about a Contagious act, but Allegra cuts him off. This is a licensed establishment. She works here. She's under my protection, and under his, she nods at the constable. You'd need more than your word to drag her out. The man sputters, but he leaves, eventually. When the door finally slams shut, the entire hall erupts in applause. It takes you a moment to realise they think it was part of the act. Mina doesn't speak for hours after. She sits in the back room, hands shaking, forehead pressed to her knees. Floss makes tea. You light a candle and set it between you both. You tell her you're proud. She shakes her head. I was so scared. That's how you know it mattered. Here's a fringe fact. In rare cases, brothel owners and music hall managers forge documents claiming legal guardianship over foreign girls, just to protect them from being reclaimed by traffickers. It wasn't legal. It wasn't foolproof. But sometimes it bought them time, a chance to disappear better. Allegra gives Mina a new name, just in case. Rosa, she says, for the stage. For the stories. Mina repeats it like a prayer. You scribble the name into one of your pages that night. Rosa, who painted with silence. There's a scholarly debate, always, about whether women like you found freedom in performance or just learned to wear their chains like jewellery. You don't care. The stage is your sanctuary, the light your armour, the crowd your witness. And tonight you won. When you finally lie down, Mina curls close. Floss snores softly in the corner. The candles burned low. The city outside moans and breathes and dreams in filth. But here, just for a while, there is peace. And a name no man can take. The days grow shorter. You don't notice at first. It sneaks up on you, like most things in this city do. A shift in the light that hits the windows, a chill in the air even when the sky's blue. Before long, the lamps are being lit before supper, and your hands are always cold no matter how close you sit to the fire. London doesn't ease into autumn. It drops into it like a stone, but something's different this year. For the first time, you feel like you're not bracing for the fall. You're standing in it. Steady, scarred, sure, but upright. Not surviving by accident, but by design. Allegra starts booking you more often. Not just for the trio act, but solo spots too. She says your name gets requests now. That people come looking for you, which is terrifying, and thrilling, and strange. You tell a story one night, completely improvised, off the cuff, nothing written down. It's about a girl who disguises herself as a ghost to avoid a marriage proposal, and ends up falling in love with the priest she haunts. It makes no sense. The ending's terrible, but the audience eats it up like stew on a cold night. You walk off stage flushed with something new, not just applause, not just relief, ownership. Later, back in the dressing room, Vera throws a crumpled stocking at you. You're a bloody menace, she says. That priest story was ridiculous, you grin. You cried. Because I thought the ghost was real, she snaps, then smirks. But yes, I cried. She's better now. Not healed, maybe never fully that, but stronger. She started doing her own hair again, and laughing, loud, wickedly, like her voice was stolen and she finally ripped it back from someone's grasp. Rosa, is painting again. Not on canvas exactly, that's too expensive, but she sketches on scrams, on walls, in the dirt outside, little portraits, half dreams. You find one under your pillow, your face drawn softer than you've ever seen it. She shrugs when you confront her. Your mouth was hard to do, she says. It doesn't sit still. She's right. You don't sit still anymore. None of you do. Here's your historical fact. While most women in the Victorian sex trade were isolated by circumstance, some formed cohabitation groups, loose domestic partnerships that blurred the lines between friendship, necessity, and chosen family. They shared rent, childcare, food, grief. Scholars call them survival collectives. You call them Tuesday. Because now the flat isn't just a place you sleep, it's a fortress, it's a home. Floss starts teaching the new girls, not officially, not with a chalkboard or rules. But she takes them aside after their first few shifts and tells them things no one else would. How to fake drunk without losing balance. How to lace your corset loose enough to breathe but tight enough to sell. She tells one girl how to sharpen a hairpin. Another how to read a room with her ears. I'm not doing this forever, she says one night, swirling a chip mug of something unidentifiable. But until I'm not, I might as well make the place better. You nod. It's the most Floss thing she's ever said. You, meanwhile, have started reading on stage, not full stories, just fragments, quotes. Little riddles that don't seem to have endings. People love it. Especially the men. They lean in, ears twitching, like dogs begging for scraps. "You're clever," one says after a show, slipping a coin into your palm. "I know," you say. You don't thank him. You don't have to anymore. Here's a fringe fact you find one night in a half-burned pamphlet from a women's reading room in Clerkenwell. A group of performers once hosted secret literacy sessions in the back of a music hall dressing room. Mostly women. A few boys. They used makeup mirrors to reflect candlelight onto the pages. They called themselves the paperbacks. It lasted 6 months before someone turned them in. You think about starting something similar. Not yet, but soon. Because there's power in knowing the words before someone else writes them. One night you sit up late with Rosa and Vera and Floss, each of you holding a cup of something hot. The flat smells like onions and damp wool. The cat is missing again. Vera's telling the story of the time she convinced a client she was a French duchess with amnesia and nearly got him to pay for a boat ticket back to Paris. "Would have made it 2, she says, "if I hadn't laughed when he offered to buy me a diamond-encrusted Bible." Floss wipes tears from her eyes. "You're a criminal." "Criminals have rules," Vera says, and winks. You all laugh. And for a moment it feels like the world is small enough to hold in your hands. Here's a scholarly debate that doesn't come with footnotes, whether stories like yours should be told at all. Some say they glamorize suffering. Others say they dehumanize. Some argue that by telling them, we trap you in the very cages you fought to escape, but that debate always misses the point. You were never silent, you were just never listened to, until now. And even if the story bends, gets blurred, gets smudged at the edges, you're here. You lived. You kissed, you laughed, you loved, you loved. Even when the city tried to steal everything else, it couldn't take that. You lean your head on Rosa's shoulder. Floss hums some melody that never quite finds a key. Vera's halfway through another impossible tale. The candle flickers, you close your eyes, and you feel warm. Not because of the fire, because you're seen. It starts with a headline. Slaughter in Whitechapel, woman found mutilated in alley. You don't see it until mid-afternoon. Someone left the paper on the bar at the Star and Crown folded to the crime report, the ink still fresh enough to smear under your thumb. At first it feels distant, a horror that doesn't belong to your streets. You've read headlines like it before, gruesome tales printed in cheap columns to shock readers in Chelsea and Clapham and anywhere else far enough away to sleep at night. But then you see the name, Polly. You know her. Not well, just enough. A girl with a raspy voice and a habit of scratching her arm when she lied. She sold oranges in the morning and herself in the evenings, always claimed she was quitting both. She once told Mina that she believed ghosts could drown, that you had to keep moving or they'd cling to your skin, and she's dead now. The alley they found her in is 4 streets from where you last saw her, sitting on a crate, eating a bruised apple and laughing about something Vera said. That night, no one goes to the music hall. Not because Allegra cancels the show, she doesn't. The doors open, the lamps are lit, but the girls don't come, not all of them. Not with a killer out there, slicing women open and leaving their names behind like torn seams. You stay in the flat, so does Mina, so does Floss. Vera locks the door and pushes a chair under the handle. "Just for tonight," she says. No one argues. Here's your historical fact, and it's one that sticks in your throat. In 1888, a series of brutal murders began in Whitechapel, targeting women believed to be prostitutes. The press called the killer Jack the Ripper. The police called him a mystery. The women called him a promise that their lives could be taken, then twisted into spectacle. The city turns ugly fast. Every man becomes a suspect. Every woman becomes a warning. You start walking faster, carrying heavier things, watching every shadow like it's breathing. Mina doesn't speak for hours at a time now. She flinches at every knock. You find her once in the middle of the night, standing in the corner, knife in hand, staring at the door like it said something cruel. Floss sleeps with a hammer under her bed. Vera stops wearing anything that looks like red. You do something you haven't done in months. You stop performing. It isn't fear, not exactly. It's something quieter, deeper, like your voice has slipped down your throat and curled into a fist. You try to write. The ink runs in circles. You try to joke. The punchlines taste like metal. Another girl dies, then another. Each time the name cuts deeper. Annie, Liz, Catherine. Names that could belong to anyone, names that do. You start keeping a list, not for the public, not for the stage. Just for you, a roll call of the fallen. Polly, rasped when she laughed Annie. Always wore 2 coats, even in July, Liz. Claimed she was Swedish royalty, half believed at Catherine, sold flowers when she couldn't sell anything else Mary Jane, lived 3 doors down. You once lent her a pair of stockings. You write them down like prayers. Here's a fringe fact the newspapers don't print. Many of the Ripper's victims were known by the girls around you. Some even shared beds, shared meals. Shared fears. Their deaths weren't just headlines, they were holes. In rooms, in routines, in hearts. The city wants to turn them into fables. Sad, broken, fallen women who made the mistake of being too visible, too alone, too female. You refuse. One night Vera speaks up. "We should do something," Floss snorts. "Like what? Hold hands and wait our turn?" "No," Vera says. "We tell their stories on stage." You stare at her. Are you serious?" "Dead." You look at Mina. She nods. So you do it. You build a sketch, not a comedy, not quite, but not a tragedy either. You call it The Names They Forgot. No one gets murdered. No blood. Just voices. 5 women, each with a different laugh, a different secret, a different last meal. You're all on stage. You wear simple dresses, no feathers, no sparkle, just yourselves, and you talk. The crowd doesn't know what to do with it at first. They expect flirtation, fanfare, they get silence, breath, truth. Then applause, real rising applause. Not everyone claps. Some sneer. One man shouts, "Get back to the jokes!" You bow anyway. Here's a scholarly debate that still rages today. Did the Ripper murders change how society saw prostitutes, or did they confirm what the public already believed? That these women were expendable, that their deaths could be turned into stories, investigations, urban legends. You know what they did. They turned fear into performance. So you take it back. The next night you perform the sketch again. Then again. Allegra prints flyers. People start lining up for it. Not for the blood, for the women. You keep adding to the list backstage. Polly, Annie, Liz, Catherine, Mary Jane. And the ones not in the papers. Doris caught typhus in February. Nell, overdosed behind the bakery. Tess, vanished after the landlord changed the locks. Mary, your Mary. You sang better than anyone, you keep them close. In your pockets, in your voice, in your story. Here's the last thing you write that week. We are not warnings, we are witnesses. Because that's what you are now. Not a ghost, not a girl waiting in the dark, not even a survivor. A witness. And that, in this city, might be the most dangerous thing of all.